could not look out the same windows that whites looked out of. And lastly, you could not had another law in some states that you could not play games with white folks. But anyhow, that was called a slave code, which says very specifically how black folk were to behave in society and how white folks were to behave. And everybody was expected to honor it. And if a white person violated it, they were just as much a risk as a black person. They called him nowadays a nigger lover. He was one out of town too. If he was in a school, they called him teaching a black child. It would cost him $100 fine and 39 lashes to teach him, get caught trying to teach a black person to read because you're trying to make him equal. So that's how those laws came into effect. Now, I skipped this earlier. This is just showing you the difference between colonial slavery, which is modern slavery, and white slavery. You notice in here, churches, everybody felt some responsibility to everybody who had been a slave except black folks. Nobody held any responsibility. We were treated totally different. So if anybody ever talked about, well, there are other people who were enslaved and they made it. The slavery was totally different from blacks than any other kind of slavery that ever been on the history of this earth. Also important for you to know is that was why in the book I talk about why certain people were treated differently between blacks and whites. For instance, reason for indentured whites. Those whites went into slavery because they were constituting available slave food, but blacks were because whites perceived themselves as being masters. For instance, American Indians, they were not white, but they were considered heathens, but the colonists respected them. So there's a whole bunch of things, and I go through all those things in the book, and I'm going to waste your time to show you that anybody who was enslaved was totally different from blacks. They did not give you the same considerations. Now, also, just very quickly, I don't want to waste too much time on all this with you, is that if anybody ever asked you, all around the world, it was totally different. In global racial ordering, they set up an ordering system when they started the slavery process in the West and around the world. Like for instance, Asia, they had a system over there before the Asia. What they did there, because they're hiring that scale. Remember this, that the scale was this. The order went white, yellow, brown, and black. And everything that goes down, the value becomes less as you go down. And so the techniques they used were different. So up here, when you went into Asia, for instance, to enslave those people, you had large, complex civilization of yellow-skinned people. So the colonial powers that simply imposed a numerical small superstructure over them, which means they sent a few whites there to dominate, just a few whites to be their overseers. Now look at North America, for instance, and see before I get there, they were allowed, they kept letting the people keep their power. They exploited the people and the land. They allowed Asian culture, their language, and their family structure to remain intact. Now to get down to North Americans, they were brown-skinned people. The colonial power confiscated their land. They killed and forced the natives into less desirable land that they called reservations. They allowed the colonial powers to exploit the land, pass the ownership of wealth to their heirs. Native American culture and heritage remained intact and were enshrined into the United States coinage. See, they respected the Indians, so on our coins, we put the Indians' heads on the coins. In our museums, we put pictures and paintings of it. As a matter of fact, the first emblem for the United States was an Indian. Before we had Uncle Sam, it was an Indian. White folk bragged about going around learning the English, learning how to speak with the Indians, learning their language. But when you got to black folk, nothing was left intact. When you found blacks, for instance, they colonized them, they imposed total control over them and colonized them. They exploited their land and their people and their resources for centuries. And they executed mass displacement of the people by shipping them around the world into slavery. They took their wealth from them, and also they destroyed their families, they destroyed their culture, they destroyed their history. And they didn't identify with anything. So what I'm saying, so even though people say, well, they invaded China, they invaded this, they did not do it the same way. The further you go down the line, and skin color, the more severe everything has been, and depressing and exploiting. Now you find, now who was doing all this, all exploiting? These are the countries that were involved in the exploitation of black folk, the major slave traders. It was England, France, Dutch, Spain, Portuguese, and the Arab nations. Yep, and I want to call something to your attention here. The harshest people in exploiting black folk and enslaving black folk were the English. And now watch this skin color. Watch how the color gradations go down. Watch these gradations. Now, English, where it was white at the top, they were the hardest against black folk. France, again, white, they were the second hardest. Dutch, again, white, they were third hardest. Spain, the color begins to get a little darker. They were not as bad, they were swarthy color. Portugal, again, not as bad, they swarthy color. Arabs, again, were the milder in treating, in how they treated blacks. But they were the darker. So even though the Arabs were enslaving blacks, they were much easier on blacks than all the others in the treatment. But over here, it reversed itself. In terms of who was in slavery the longest, those who were the hardest was in it for the shortest period of time. And it goes down again. Whites were in it shorter than anyone that are darker. The Arabs, who were so mild against black folk, have been in it the longest. They've been in it now for 1,300 years and still doing it. So all that I thought you might be interested in knowing who's doing the slavery, who's getting it, and how it's being controlled based on skin color. And yes. Yes. And all this information I'm trying to give you all just background information so we can get into real media discussion in a few minutes.
Okay.
Ask anything you want. And this is just based on research I'm trying to give you my understanding of how the game is being played. So the slaves, now in 1705 century, slave codes went into existence across the country, which told white folk, white institutions, white governments how they were to act with black folk, and told black folk how they would act. In 1710, something here happened that's very unique for you. You have to remember this. In 1710, people said, look, we got so many blacks coming into the country, and we set up a system on controlling them, but how do we control them internally? So in 1710, the state of Virginia passed something that's very important. They enacted what they call Meritorious manumission. Meritorious manumission went into effect in 1710. And what it says is this, that any black person who invents something that a white person can use to make money off of, any black person who saves a white man's life, or any black person who saves a white man's property, or any black man who informs on any kind of thing that can be a potential threat to white people, can receive his freedom, can receive public recognition, and money. Okay? So that started in 7. That was called Meritorious manumission. That went into effect. Now what I did then, that's called official crafting. That system has never been applied based on my understanding of human behavior and anthropology against any people except black folk, where you officially reward somebody for doing it in their own people. You hear what I'm telling you now? That started. So now I went and tracked down 150 possible insurrections of slaves, slave revolts, and a black person squealed in every one of them. Whether I don't care if it was Nat Turner or all of them. A black person squeals. As a matter of fact, in Harper's Ferry, the night John Brown came in town to free the slaves, there was a black guy sitting on the porch at the hotel. His name was, I'll give you his name, you don't know, his name was Haywood Shepherd. He saw John Brown and his group coming in, spotted him, and ran out the street to try to get his manumission. And they shot him dead in the streets. Was he going to alert the whites that John Brown and his group was there, and that shot did still alert the town. And that's how John Brown got captured in that firehouse, and he had a bunch of blacks with him. They all got killed and hanged, okay? And because they caught him by just killing Haywood Shepherd, they erected a monument to Haywood Shepherd in Harper's Ferry. It's still there. And if you ever go to Harper's Ferry, and I'll tell y'all where to find it, because whites have got slick now, they get it. If you go down to Harper's Ferry, you find an old hotel, and the town is a monument now. It's right beside the house. They got a big brown box over it. And pull that box back and take a picture of it. And look and read the inscription on it. And it says, this is the kind of nigga we like. And they talk about it. His name is Haywood Shepherd. And that he gave his life for the cause. So take another picture of it. And you can move the box. But I guarantee that is the only monument to a Sambo in this country. The only monument. So if you ever get a chance to get a picture of it, And I don't know how much longer it'll be that they find out I'm telling you all, they might even destroy it. So, but go down there, so take a picture of that, okay? But that became the official system in this country, and it's still operative today. And I can take you right now to Washington, D.C., you still see people doing it. They may be sitting on the Supreme Court, they might be on television, okay? But they're still being rewarded, recognized, and getting compensation at the expense of their own people, okay? And that's why later on we start talking about the difference between a sample and Uncle Tom. I explain all this to you. And I just thought, and on this chart I started to give you some indications of all some of them that were exposed. The blacks started voting in New York, they were exposed. The slaves voted in Maryland, they were exposed. And not like more than 150 of them. And everyone, not one single one, got away without being exposed. And some black got free, got recognition through Meritorious manumission, okay? But let me get to this point. Right around this point, something else began to happen too. Around 1750, black population in this country hit about 34% national. It was very important. The population went to 34%. And that began to scare whites in this country. And so the whites in this country started sending messages. First of all, they organized, called themselves the Continental Congress. You read about this in history book, they don't tell why. They began to send letters back to England and said, look, stop sending the slaves over. We're scared to death. We got 34% now as black all over the country. And in the South, they were up to 55, 65%. And whites are scared to death. And England said, no, we got a good thing going. Because they had a franchising system. You know what's system about franchising with McDonald's, Burger King? England started the franchising system. It's like I told you about the factories and capitalism. Now, franchising also came out of slavery. And what England was doing, England was saying, if you go over to the United States, I'll give you free land. And just like Burger King and McDonald's send you the straws and napkins and the containers, they said, we give you the land, we send you the slaves, we'll send you the protection, we'll send you the seeds, and everything you produce, you send it back to us, we'll process it and send it back to you. So the franchise, that's where the franchising system came from, just like capitalism and everything else, shipping blacks. So now, if England's franchising so many blacks into the United States, the whites got scared. They said, we want to get out of this. Not only we want to get out of too many blacks, but we want to get out of the franchising system. We don't want you to keep taking our products and we have to buy them back from you. We had these blacks pick all this cotton and send it to you, and in England, you make it into cloth, and we buy the cloth back. See what I'm saying? And so that's what's created what we call the Revolutionary War. But they don't tell you that's what created the Revolutionary War. Those are the factors. They wanted to get out of having all the products that black folk were picking going to England. And they have to buy it back from them. What blacks were picking, all the indigo, rice, sugar, rum, cotton, tobacco, everything. As a matter of fact, at that point in time, blacks were producing almost 100% of all the sugar on earth. Almost 100% of all the cotton. Because up to this point in time, people were all wearing wool. There was no such thing as cotton cloth, fabrics, and textiles. And then so blacks were shipping off so much stuff into England that England was getting so fat and sassy that it created what we call an industrial revolution in England. You read about the industrial revolution in England, they don't ever tell you that what created the industrial revolution in England that they take credit for was black products being sent to them. And they were manufacturing and processing and selling it back to this country at an add-on price and add-on value. So that created, so they were scared to death of all those blacks in this country. So as soon as the Revolutionary War was over, the first act of the United States Congress was to do what? Pass a law that says what? No more Negroes come to this country unless you are a slave. So the first act of Congress in 1790, after the Revolutionary War, it was put a ceiling on black folk. They said this is a white country, no more unless you come in as a slave. And furthermore, that they wanted to end slavery, period. But the rich plantation owners say, well, look, I've invested a lot of money into these blacks. I got to get my money out of it. So the United States Congress says, well, then let's close out slavery in 25 years. So by the year 1808, let's everybody kill off international slave trade. And that's why that's kill off international slave trade. So in 1790, they passed the first immigration law, says it's a white country, zero quota on blacks. That's why you can't get Haitians in. We'll get to that. Okay? So they put a zero quota on black folk. Then they also passed the second act, which says we also, every 10 years, we want a census taken. So we know how many blacks are in the country. We know what you're trying to trick us or raise over that number. Okay? So now, by 18, let's create another thing now. Up to this point in time, most of the slaves coming to the United States were 68 to 70% were black men. Very important for all my sisters when we get into this feminism. I tell you, it was primarily black men. So the people that were carrying the burden of slavery was not black women, contrary to what I'm fighting my sisters on TV about this all the time. It was not black women. White people in this country did not need black women. They didn't need you. Now some of them say, well, they needed us to go to bed with. No, they didn't need you. They had all the white women Indians they needed to go to bed with. What they wanted was the biggest, burliest, blackest man they could get, so they worked to death before he was 40 years of age. Because there was no retirement plan for him, no Social Security. They just wanted him dead. They did not want him to go into old age. The worst thing that happened to a white man was having an old black man. They didn't need you. Now listen to what I'm saying. They didn't need you. They wanted you dead by a certain age. And they carried this whole term saying, well, instead of a black, that's why they got this thing about a lazy slave. It's this nigga not working hard enough and dying fast enough for me. Now see, but there's never, and common sense was said, what's the incentive for having a hard-working slave? And I was on a television show, not really television show, radio show with Tom Sullivan, that group up in Michigan. He was screaming about, black slaves were lazy. He was supposed to be lazy. But the conservatives saying, well, blacks didn't do that much, they were lazy. And they also going around saying now, well, blacks have learned poor work habits. That's the reason we're not successful in this country now in business, because we developed poor working habits in slavery. We learned how to lean on the shelf. We needed to feign illnesses, pretend we were sick. Now, that's what some of the black conservatives are saying around the country. I tell you, they're saying that's why you all in your problems, because you're lazy and don't have a good work habit. And I always say to them on TV, why would my people want to be good, hard-working slaves? I mean, they might not be the smartest people in the world, but they ain't dumb. Let's give black folk trans some sense, you know? Even though you got laws that I'm not going to educate you, but at least pretend we got some sense, you know? And I congratulate those black slaves. They should have pretended they were sick. But anyhow, without black conservatives trying to criticize them, but anyhow, okay, now about this point, that's when northern segregation began anyway. There were a few blacks that were not enslaved at that point in time for various reasons. So some of those blacks tried to get real slick at this point. So some of them jumped up and said, well, you know, we had some black conservatives in those days too. You know, all those I told you they got free from Meritorious manumission. Now remember what I told you? Now they were free. They said, well, I've been Meritorious manumission now. So first I'm gonna get me some slaves too. So they jumped up and tried to get slaves. We had about that time about 400 different blacks and going around. We got the Meritorious manumission, had them some slaves. And so all of a sudden white folks said, hold on, you can't do that. And they said, what do you mean we can't do that? He said, no. See, because if you do that, you violate that public policy where you're supposed to be supported. See, you cannot own slaves when you're a slave. Because then you come up, you now equate yourself to me. And I as the master. That's right. So those blacks, so Delaware passed, I might not have it on here, but Delaware passed the first law saying no black person can own a slave. Because see, if you own a slave, you've elevated yourself in status. Remember I told you about the public policy in 1638, saying a black must always be supported. So a few blacks, those meritorious, manumitted black folk tried to get slick and get them some slaves. But it didn't work, and they shot that down real fast. See, I gotta go a little fast because I can't lose you all. I'm gonna get through all this stuff. Now to get our people, keep our people in line, they set up a system. They said, now we got all these blacks, but you know, to get the maximum use out of it, get them in the training period. So they set up a system called seasoning black folk. So they sent black folk out of Africa. They didn't just send you right into the United States into a slave field. What they did, they sent you into the islands, the Caribbean, for 6 months to be seasoned. That means to be whipped and taught, to be broken like a wild horse. Now you bring a wild horse, you're going to break it in, you train it. You go buy a dog, you got a period, you got somebody to break it, learn how to go to the bathroom and take them outside. So most of the blacks had to go into the Caribbean to be seasoned. And now let me tell you that typically, just for your monetary interest, when blacks are being brought to those factories on the West Coast, whites are paying on the average of about $25 to $35 a head for any black that was being sold out of Africa. But they set up a system called compounded interest that you also find in business. So So what they wanted a 15% return on their money. So when they got in this country, they would typically sell those blacks for about $400, $450 a piece. Okay? So I want to give you some facts, you know what kind of money they're making off of it. Now, when they got into those islands, they had a process like this. They teach them how to break it like a wild horse. And these are the things they wanted for me. First of all, I want this black to be taught discipline. Okay? And so what they would do is subject them to endless, hard, tedious, dirty work. They want you to be inferior to whites. So they set a system about never seeing any black with power in an authoritative position. Nobody could do that. And if somebody came around to a tribe, if you did this, another white person would shoot you as a white person because that threatened his system. See, if he has 200 slaves somewhere by himself, and he saw you with your slave being in charge, he thought that his slaves would get arrogant and up. And they could not. Thank you. No role models. You can have the role models. And so they set this system of never seeing a black with any power and anything that tends to suggest to another black person that he can be something special or be other than what they want you to be. So then they taught you to know your place. That was the whole thing about the color line, and Jim Crow followed that. To be backward and childlike, they planned you into ignorance and humiliation. They always humiliated you. They told that you were childlike. That's why they always called you boy. They would give you a title, all this kind of stuff. I'm not going to bless your intelligence with all this, but they set up a religious system called the seasoning process. Yes, sir.
Wasn't that what they do at Haiti? Putting down the Haiti and the West Indies?
Yes, right.
Down the Haiti.
Right.
And the West Indies, they went to Haiti. And as you grew, they stayed in Haiti.
Right. That's what happened. They would take you down in the islands and they would treat you and season you and break you in. So when you come in this country, then they would sell you on the market as being untreated and seasoned black. And they would put out a little advertisement about what all you could do. You know, if you can speak the language, and you know left and right, you know a few words, then you sold it ahead for all the higher value. Yes, sir.
How successful would you say that system really was in terms of percentages, 50% of the slaves, 20% of the slaves? Because you had all these rebellions, and it's obvious today that it's not totally effective.
No, it wasn't. There were some blacks who just didn't go for the okie doke. Some of them still trying to get out of it. But one of the things I should tell you that, contrary to what you're being taught, just about the Underground Railroad, going north, blacks going north, going to Canada, a lot of that's BS too. Black folk weren't that dumb. Because see, blacks in the South, most of them found it easy to go around to Florida, go to Spanish territory by walking 50 miles across the road. I keep running by my friends with stories. See, they keep running the game. I went up to them, I said, why don't y'all put BS in my folk? That every black want to get on the Underground Railroad heading north. That's BS. It was. Black folks began working educated, they weren't dumb. See? Most of them say, I can leave in Alabama, go right into Florida. Florida's a Spanish territory. I can go right across and nobody come out of the country. Why would I walk 1,000 miles to get to Canada and not go across the road to be in Florida? But everybody go look at the Black History course, you got the Underground Railroad heading north. I said, black people are so crazy, you see? I do what those smart ones say. But the reason that's important, I'm reminded that not because I came from Florida, but because I want you to understand how we got into Seminole Wars and how Florida came in as a territory. Contrary to what people, they never put in the history book, you can talk about the Seminole Wars, the Great Seminole Wars. The Seminole Wars came because black slaves were running off into Florida, and they were intermingling with the Indians and been placed in prominent positions. And that whites couldn't stand it. And they wanted those slaves back. And the worst thing, again, as the good Reverend said, you were creating role models for slaves by letting those blacks run off into Florida and be role models for Indians. They were interpreters, they were scouts, they were chiefs. And that was what triggered the 3 Seminole Wars in this country. As a matter of fact, that's how Jacksonville came into existence. They kept sending Stonewall Jackson to bring those slaves back. He went down to Jacksonville and burned up a fort and killed about 200 women and children in Jacksonville. And he named Jacksonville after him. We had Fort Negro down in the Chattahoochee River. He also destroyed a fort there, shot one ball into a fort, killed a whole bunch of women and kids because the men would always leave. But we had some very prominent blacks involved in Florida. One of the biggest ones I told you about was John Horse, I mentioned somebody. John Morris was one of the baddest blacks that ever lived in this country. Forget about Martin Luther King, forget about Malcolm X, forget about Du Bois. The baddest black that ever lived in this country was a black man named John Morris. He was from Florida. He kicked this country's posterity for 50 years. And they never caught him. Never caught him and never killed him. And he was a chief, and he led the black, he was one of those scouts that led. You heard about the Trail of Tears, where they marched all the Indians out of Florida out to Cherokee territory. They tell you that was led by a black man named John Morris. He took his people and they carried a bunch with him. He was tied. He was the chief, second person to Osceola. Osceola was the Seminole Indian chief, and they imprisoned Osceola because he was trying to get his wife back. His wife was married to a black woman named Morning Dew. Morning Dew was a black woman, that was his wife. They kidnapped her, and he went in, and then what triggered the Third Seminole War, he went to get her back. And under a flag of truce, they caught him and stuck him in a prison called in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, and stuck him in a damp cold cell. He finally died of pneumonia and exposure. And with it, he had about 30 or 40 blacks with him at that time. And they also killed him. So he never got Morning Dew back. That left John Morris and another black man named Wildcat, an Indian named Wildcat. They went all over the West, fighting and killing the whites. They finally went to Mexico a couple times and came back out. They finally killed Wildcat out in Texas. They never caught John Morris. The last time they heard him, he rolled off in the South by himself. That was the baddest black that ever lived in this country, as the only black that ever took this country on, fist to fist, toe to toe without the rhetoric, this fault, nailed, they never got it. Okay? So there are evidence of black folks that did what they're supposed to do and got away with it. And you talk about all the other black heroes, I don't call them heroes because all of them didn't make it. They're dead. This one, they never caught it and never beat it. Okay? So, but anyhow, that triggered the Seminole War, and because of the Seminole Wars, that's how we got Florida. Because we ran Spain out and took it over. But Florida came into the Union because the Indians and blacks kept getting together in that state, and they were trying to get the slaves back. But let me mention one point about the Indians, because there's another myth floating around about Indians were worse treated than blacks. Don't believe it. BS again. The worst people that have been treated, as I told you, that global distribution scale, based on skin color, black folks. See, Indians are brown than you. They're over blacks. Blacks are worse treated. I.e., as an example, Indians, I found that the biggest killers of black slaves were Indians. Because they knew very quickly, the Indians weren't dumb either, that the only unarmed people in the United States were who? Black folks. I would look at the 20-year period, seeing and just gauge what whites were doing versus Indians. Indians were the biggest slaughters of black folks. What they would do, the whites would put blacks out in the field, work the field all during the day. Every time an Indian attack came, guess who was exposed? They had blacks with burglar alarms. Let me give you some other piece of information about Indians so you don't buy the garbage most. You don't, I leave you all there. I don't want you to believe in it. The BS anymore. Also, Indians were the primary hunters of black folk. Every time they caught a black runaway slave, they picked up $20 for it. Track him down and bring him back to his master. $20 a head. Also, I want you to know that out of the 6 so-called civilized Indian tribes in the United States, all of them were slaveholders. Every one of them were held slaves, sold slaves, and captured slaves. All of them were slaveholders. And even more important, last I want you to know, that all 6 civilized tribes fought on the side of the South to maintain slavery. Now you remember all that, okay? So you start thinking about, well, poor Indians, no, poor Indians. Indians had more advantage than you did. And in addition to that, they were treated better. Where on one hand, Indians, every Indian in the United States was treated as a non-citizen, just like a black non-citizen. Both were non-citizens. But as non-citizens, Indians got land. They could hold land or they were given reservations. Okay? 2, Indians could get free medical care. 3, Indians got free seeds and tools. 4, Indians got free schooling. Not only did Indians get free schooling, Indians were required to go to school by law. On the other hand, with black folk, it was against the law for you to be caught getting an education. It was against the law for you to own land. It was against the law for you to have a weapon. It was against the law for you to protect yourself. This is what I'm telling you now. And also, those Indians, again, were brought into the system. And they were brought into the system for a very specific reason, because they did not want the Indians to identify with black folk. This thing, which you're going to find the same thing is going on today. This group will all lumped together to make sure whites are never in the minority. Because back then you passed the Revolutionary War, they passed the public policy says, in a democracy, the majority wins and the minority loses. Remember that. The majority wins and the minority loses. So the whites say, if we ever dare come into a minority status, we're going to immediately incorporate some of these people going down the sheet to make sure we never get in the minority. Okay? As we started talking about here. Now get over here, for instance. I started talking about populations. Whites always manipulate the population to make sure they're always the majority, so they're always a winner. They always make sure that you're always the loser by being the minority. And later I'm going to tell you, never let anybody call you a minority. Because you are the only planned permanent minority in this country. That makes you the only planned permanent loser. You can never win the way it's structured. Unless you get into a majority status someplace. And later on we start talking about some of these things in relation today, you always struggle to get into the majority. And when you get into the majority, always say, I am the majority and I'm now the winner. And that's why we can't win in Detroit, Michigan, St. Louis, Newark, Washington, D.C., where blacks make up a major population. Because they don't understand this. And they got you locked in. You don't know how to play the game. I go to Detroit, Michigan. They got an 84% black population, a black mayor, a black city council. I said, what are you doing for black folk? Help them start business and get money. He said, well, we got an office of minority business. I said, how in the world can you have an office of minority business and the city is 84% black? And I go downstairs and find out that in the contracts and services and goods, that whites are getting 96%. Same thing in Washington, D.C. and every other black city. Because you got locked into the mindset of being a minority. You're so enamored with being a minority that you believe that even when you become a majority, you cannot shift gears and say, I'm not a majority. And I go all over this country and I can't even find a black person that would even stand up and say, I represent black people. I don't represent minorities, I represent black people. I go to the United States Congress, black Congress, we're friends now, a lot of them belong to our institute now. I said, why don't you just stand up for black people? They said, well, you know, we can't do it. We got to have support of women and Asian and Hispanic. Now, I'm telling you, the only one I found, the most vigorous one I found to support black people was Alcee Hastings. He said, put me on your board. He said, I don't give a shit. I go to the NAACP. We got 3 organizations in the United States that's going to be looking out for black folk. I go look at their mandate and they say, well, we got to look out for minorities and women and abused children, wives. That's wait a minute, hold it. So, make a bottom line, we don't have anybody looking out for black folk. The worst thing is that even when I find minorities say, yeah, we're going to look out for black folk, doctor. We're totally agreement with you. And I said, fine. We're going to look out for black folk with a subgroup. I said, what subgroup? We're going to look out for black women. Or we're going to look out for black children. I said, wait a minute. Why don't you just simply look out for black folk? Because they're scared to say, I'm just going to look out for black folks. And they said, well, we're going to look. So right now, the whole movement in this country now is to be concerned about black children. And I told them to me, I'm against it. I'm not interested in black children. Like, you know why? I'm interested in black adults. If I say the adults, let them say their own children. That's right. You know what I'm saying? And every time I go someplace, they go, well, we got to set these programs to save the children. No, don't save the children, save the parents. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Isn't there a law that says black men are supposed to be kept in a certain realm?
Yes, but see, because it's built into your structure. It's built into your structure that won't come out and tell you necessarily explicitly, but the entire issue of racism is male, is territorial, which means males. That's what you fight for. Every male wants to be able to practice territoriality, meaning protect his own turf, protect his own cage, protect his own lair, like an animal. The white male here, the white male, okay, they got a ranking order. See, whites love ranking orders. We're going to talk a lot about that if I get enough time this morning. They love ranking orders. White female was placed on the pedestal. That's called Southern culture, Southern chivalry. That's why you always hear the Klan, all the white organizations, protect white womanhood. That's why between the years of 1882 and 1892, they lynched 2,800 black men. And all of them had something to do with being in a white woman's presence, coming to the door when a white man was home, not taking off your hat, winking, blinking, looking at her, staring, shaking hands with her, touching her, being too close to her. So that's because she's in a protected category. She is like precious china. She's to be protected at all costs. If you're going to read in your white racist article, this is what they're after. Protect the white woman. Now, the white man put himself on the level where he is equal to any woman because he wanted direct, immediate access to her. I don't care if it's an Indian woman or a black woman. He wants to be able to go to bed with her and do anything he wants to do. So he wants her, but he wants a white woman up above him, placed and protected. And below him is the black male. He wants the black male kept below him under all circumstances. Okay? And because he wants you kept beneath him, that's how a lot of these myths were created. See, he figured out he keep the two. He wants these two people as far apart as possible. Nicole and OJ. Which was far apart as possible. He wants as far apart. This is what the fight's over. Keep these two as far apart as possible. Now, and after he went through this, that's why he always puts out all these myths about the black man. About the black man being oversexed. Black man is an animal. Black man is this. Black man is larger than sexual organs. He puts this out to try to scare the white female to keep her away from this guy. Yeah. Now, and that's why so what he's done now, he created so much of a myth. He created an attraction. And so consequently, and to make sure that these two didn't get together, so not only would he lynch this guy to keep him in the hole, but he also castrated him. Because he did not want him to get here, so anything he had, he just cut it off. Because he didn't want to cut this, that's what he's in the center for, to cut that off. Now that's what the whole thing, the court situation, OJ, he cut those off, those two individuals. But even more than that, whenever he does get here, if this guy ever does get to her, then that's why they always go around saying the black man has a long penis. That's what it's all about. Yes, sir.
You were talking a few minutes ago, and you distinctly said that there are people, blacks in particular, who say, well, I'm for black women.
Right.
I'm for black children. It seems that there is just an impediment about being able to say, I'm for black men.
That's right. That's why you won't find one or two organizations in the country. I'm for black men. Like I said, the best they'll do is say, I'm for black men in a mentor program for black youth. Black youth. They'll do that. They'll do it. They're qualified. And that's the only one you're going to find. You might find a black organization that says, let's create a black organization for men to take care of the black youth. That's all. But you got to put that qualifier on the end that is for save the children. See what I'm saying? They're a mentor program for black youth. If I go into the school system, let's take Detroit, Michigan, for instance. They'll have a black program that deals with black men, but it's to be a mentor program for whom? For children. Because see, children don't offend anybody. Women don't offend anybody. But see, you black men, you all are offensive. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, sir. No, right. Well, see, because you're not a threat. And so you can hear black people run around and say, well, you know, we got a double problem being a woman and black. Yes. Black women are higher on this level than the black man. As I said, that's why the burden of slavery is carried by the black man. And plus that, keep in mind that the difference between trying to mix the sex issue with racism is like trying to mix apples and oranges. It's like trying to mix a headache with cancer. It might be a headache being a woman, but it's cancerous being black in this country. Because you see, women are essential for the promulgation of society. You must always have women for society to continue to exist. You don't need black people, black men. You don't need them. The white male can fertilize her. You are the expendable ingredient. Listen to what I'm telling y'all now. So if they get rid of, and they know that if you get rid of the black man, the black woman and the black child is vulnerable. You are exposed, and you can't do anything about it because you don't have the black man to protect you. And that's why we get a little further along. You find that when we get up to 1800s, that your situation is identical where it was in 1830. I'm going to show you that in 1830, you had the same number of black men in prison. In this country right now, jump ahead and tell you. Right now in America, between the ages of 20 years of age and 25 years of age, means 35 years of age. In this age range, approximately 39% of all the black men in the United States are either in prison, on parole, or on probation. 39%. Now, you only got that only leaves you about 6% left. Now, and I'm going to tell you what happened to the other 6% in a second. Okay? 39% of all black men are either in prison, parole, or probation. Now, let's see what happens to the rest of it. Let's take unemployment. I'm way away from my history, but I'm jumping ahead on some other stuff now. So if you all stay with me, I might have to go back to the history. It all this relates. But if you take unemployment, contrary to what they tell you, the unemployment situation in the United States right now is 34% for blacks. 34%. What you keep reading in the paper, that 5.5%, that's for white people. And it's also only for people who are still looking for jobs. Black folk are in what we call a hidden index. They don't look for the jobs anymore. They've given up, or they have so many disabilities, whether it's drugs, alcohol, other illnesses, they're not even in the market anymore. The black unemployment across America is 34%. And in your city, and Baltimore and Detroit, you listen to what I'm telling you now, Detroit unemployment it is. How many might tell you? What do y'all think your real unemployment is in this city? Let me guess. See how many might know. Huh? You're close. There's 43% for blacks. That means almost half your population is not even working now. And for black youth in the United States, you worried about the crime. It is 57% for black youth. That's why they stand on the street corner. That's why you have to high crime. And later on, I'm going to show you why all these figures came out like that in a few minutes, but I've jumped across history, yes. National for black youth, 57%. And I shouldn't take all this, I'll give you stuff out of context. It might not make sense to you a little later, so maybe I shouldn't jump around like that. So let me go back to history a few minutes. All this tied, all this become very clear to you in a second. Yes?
On that level, where you have a white man,
Puerto Ricans? You said Puerto Ricans?
Yeah.
Puerto Ricans, like most people, most immigrants come in this country, one of the first things they learn is that if they possibly can, do not identify as black folk. Now, if they have no choice, they're stuck. But one of the first things they learn, and the last thing they forget, is stay away from black folk. Because they understand in this country that you got a ranking order that will come up pretty soon on the street. Okay? Now there's some who come into the country that are obviously black and they can't run and duck and hide, so they're stuck with you. Because Puerto Rico is a mixed country. Okay? But anybody that comes in this country that's got any sense, they're trying to identify something. They're trying to go up. So this is where all the power and wealth is. So they're trying to go up. And this is what lends a lie to one of your all's best heroes in this country, Jesse Jackson. He keeps talking about the Rainbow Coalition. Now anybody's right mind, even if you didn't know anything else, and you're not colorblind, go outside and say, where the hell is the black and rainbow? There ain't no black and rainbow.
Watch out.
Yes, sir.
Also, they also mark on your passport, BW,
Oh, yes.
black or white.
All right, well, we're going to get to that. See, now, as these groups begin to shift, these changes are going to occur. I'm going to show you how they do that. See, they're shucking and jiving again to keep these orders. And see, what the bottom line is that it is we against all the others. And that's the issue. And show you how you commit suicide, whole minority stuff in a few minutes. But that's the issue. If they get a chance, they're going to go up. And worse than that, just pretend that they were black people too. You came in this country, you got a ranking order of preference. A ranking order of preference. Why would you want to identify with somebody down underneath you? I mean, you got to be a fool to want to identify down. That's like walking down the street backwards, looking at the wrong way. They just know, if the power and the wealth and the resources are here, why do I want to identify with black folks? What's the incentive? What's the incentive for identifying with black folks? What are you going to get? What are you going to get to identify with black folks? Why would an Asian in Washington want to identify someone hang out with black folks? Why? When you are the rabbit and I'm the hound dog looking for you. That's no incentive unless you're crazy. So the issue is, basically, you better start looking out for yourself. Nobody else cares about you. There's no incentive in this country to be identified with, association with black folk. Now, Jesse can keep telling you all that. But what I'm telling you all that is a figment, about 98% a figment of Jesse's imagination. When I ran campaigns around the country, came into Atlanta City with this Rainbow Coalition, I looked at the rainbow, I saw about 99% black and even one white when they paid me off free lunch to come on with it. Why would white, what's the incentive for white? You might have some white people that don't know any better walk around. But other than that, there's no incentive. But back to my point, you all laughing, man, I'm serious. I'm serious. But so what they did here back in the population though, whites have a rule, and I got to jump ahead on you again. Okay. Built into the immigration law, I told you, they set a zero quotas. Now, remember, a zero, that's a zero quota. That's ideally what they want. They don't want zero. But what I found from research is that they have an acceptability quota. See, you hear white folks out there against quotas. They have built a quota into everything dealing with black folk. They don't want you to know about it. So even if you think about it, you die close to test this too loud. See, when you hear white folks, I'm against quotas. That's what they prefer. See, they don't want you to know about it. Our mothers say they want somebody to see your left hand wave your right. So they would say, well, I'm against quotas. But what they got built into the process, including integration, is a quota. They will tolerate somewhere between 5 and 8% of blacks in anything. And we call that a tipping point. It's called a tipping point. White folk will accept 5 to 8% of blacks in anything before they get upset. Anytime you go over 8%, they start taking action against you. They're going to take action against you between 8 and 15%. Between 18 and 15%, you expect all hell to break loose. Remember, when it gets over 8 to 15, and don't ask me how they know. I wish, when I talk to God, when I'm asking, how do they figure that out? Somehow they know. They hit a dead on every time. I'm sorry, what's that?
They're statisticians.
Yeah, and somehow they know. So if you go in and move into their neighborhoods, in a house, in their communities, somehow the minute your percentage in any given area, a block, goes over 8%, they know it and sign for houses for sale. If you put that many of your kids in their school, it goes over it. They start pulling their kids out of school. If you started going around their store, their business too often, they take that business and move it out of the neighborhood, or move it across town, or move it to another state. You see a whole factory jump up and move. In Detroit, Michigan, like the Ruiz plant. As soon as it went over to the Ruiz plant, when blacks moved into the union, UAW is the biggest union in the United States. The Ruiz plant's automobile factory. When blacks moved into Detroit in the 50s and 60s, started moving in those plants, they closed down all those plants and built 26 new plants in the suburbs. And when blacks started getting into suburban plants, they shot those plants to St. Louis, Washington, scattered all over the country. And now that blacks begin to get into it, they're going to feed them out of the country in the NAFTA agreement. And that was to do two things. To scatter the potential of blacks in numbers, because blacks are taking over the unions. Blacks are almost the backbone of the union. And they're going to not let you take over those unions and come in those factories and start dictating terms to them. So they were scattering. And remember I told you in Africa, they scattered blacks called dysphoria, or they also did the same thing what I call integration. The same thing is they scatter blacks anytime they get in a number. Because anytime you scatter somebody, you weaken their numbers in their cloud. That means either you scatter them thinking-wise, or you scatter them physically. Now, between 8 and 15%, they're going to take action against you. By then, they're going to conclude, because I told you back in 1750, when blacks got to 34%, they want that number down. They pushed that number from 34% all the way back down to 8%. They pushed it down by sending those immigration laws saying blacks will not come into this country. And they forced your population down. They went out and started encouraging other whites and other groups coming to the country to get those numbers down. They pushed the numbers down by the early 1900s, they had it down to 8%. And now we've grown back up in the country, and currently we're 12.3% of the population. We've gone past that point. You're right in the center of this thing. You're right in the center of it. And being right in the center, whites are coming after you. You see, you've gone over the mark again. You're going over the mark, and they're coming after you. That's where you are now, according to your 1990 census. Now, ironically, not only monitoring you, that's the population of blacks in America, but the population of Africans in the world population is exactly 12.3%. And that's why the poor Africans are in trouble. That's why you got problems in Somalia and Ethiopia. Because you have crossed the tolerance point of what they will accept. You're going to start checking it, like the numbers stay right on the money, won't change. I'll go back and deal with these numbers over here. Over here and going back looking. These populations went up along these lines. See, they went up and showed you. Went up to 14, 19, 17, 50, 33% of this different range. You got up in here, and all of a sudden they started forcing it down. They forced it all the way down, and went all the way down, so it gets down to 8%. And they use various kind of techniques to do this. I was Korean, some of them. By Virginia limits increases blacks. Virginia puts 5% duty on imports of slaves. They did all kind of techniques. That's why you can't get Haitians into the country. I keep trying to explain how people say, why don't you understand what they're doing to you? They say, well, we need to invade Haiti and make Haiti stay. No, invade Haiti. They're trying to keep you out of this country because they don't want you changing the American numbers. You're at 12.5%. If you bring in more Haitians, you're going to 15. That's a violation of the 10th commandment. And I got some of the dumbest blacks I know as friends and colleagues in politics talk about, we got to go back and invade Haiti so we can keep them, kick so and so out. That's not the issue. None of that stuff is the issue. The issue is courtesy. They don't want you to cross those figures. This is cultural. That's why I get my people figure that out. And that's what hurts me. And no blacks making the issue. Have you heard any blacks protesting? And what they've done, they got you locked in as a planned minority. And we can't figure out, don't you understand what they're doing to you? Saying you'll never win because we're not going to get people coming in. Yeah, all the time, every time we had problems it's not even after the Iraq war, they brought in over 200,000 Iraqi soldiers that we just finished fighting. 200,000. That is more blacks than brought in this country in 27 years under the new present immigration quota. Now, immigration quotas now, as in 1966, is 1/2 of 1%. 1 half of 1%. Last year, I think we brought in something like about 12,000 blacks. And now you're going to see Russians coming into the country. You're going to see Germans coming into the country. When the walls went down. Asian, Vietnamese. Anytime a country gets in trouble, we run out and bring these people in. Cubans come in anytime they want. They're not going to let you all in because you're not making an issue of the problem. And again, I say, is that my people don't understand, but it is too late to go out and fight. Yes. Yes, I'm sure you're right. There is some of that. You're right. Somehow we do have blacks in this country who think that, well, he's from another island, so therefore he's not aligned with me. See, whites don't think that. Remember I told you back about in the 1400s, I told you about the Mamadous. Remember that? One of the first thing they learned, I told you they built a broad sense of community based on skin color. Do any of you remember that? Whites learned early that I don't care what your individual problem is, what your religious differences are, what your nationality might be. Drop it all as soon as something comes up and go for skin color. I can have 2 white countries fighting each other right now, and they see another black country, they quit the fight and run jump you. I don't care what white person comes in here, in the country, whether he's Irish or Italian, he'll get together and participate in the lynch mob. I don't care what religion he belongs to. Protestant or Baptist or Methodist, they get together and go lynch him. Because they understand the important thing, which is skin color. Yes, sir.
Dr. Anderson, how much of the seed relates with regards to issues of immigration, foreign policy, is tied to the seasoning process? One of the things that people are not allowed to overseas is like live and say, I live without seasoning. And I did not feel like eating my food. But how much of this goes back to that seasoning process? Because a lot of black people have no opinion whatsoever about U.S. foreign policy, particularly towards the African diaspora.
Right, but what they've done is the seasoning process is now structural. It's now built into the system. And what white folks have done is I told you about, remember the slave codes I talked about in 1705? Those slave codes commissioned every institution, every organization, every religion to make sure that which was abnormal became the norm. Exactly. That's what conservatism means right now. They're saying, in other words, when you hear whites talk about, I can explain to you a little bit later on, okay, because I'm going to get to that point. So can you wait for me? Okay. I call it the tipping point. What whites call it racial balance. In their mind, a lot of white, little black is racial balance. That's racial balance. We start talking about busing and mixing. They call it racial balance, meaning we must stay in the dominance. We don't understand that. We think it means equal.
Integration to us with integration to them has been absorption.
That's right. And that's why when I left Bermuda, they even got the blacks down there integrated. Blacks down there were 68% of the population, and they were integrated with whites. So hold on a second, how do you integrate a basketball into a golf ball? And they said, well, Dr. Anderson, nobody came in and told us that. So we thought we should integrate it. And now they have nothing. They have nothing, and they're busy trying to integrate. They try to squeeze a basketball into a golf ball, so we're going to integrate too. I said, no, hold on, just stop. Just stop.
Now, I think we start before you all.
Okay. Yes, so I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to get to... Now, so on here, this is the thing that they worked out. They have all kinds of little techniques. They passed all kinds of laws. I just try to give you a variety of them to try to keep you in a permanent minority status. That's why the term is so prevalent today. They passed all kinds of anti-slavery laws, anything to keep down the population. They even passed laws to make sure that they had Meritorious manumission. they also passed laws to stop white folks from releasing blacks too. Because they also never wanted more than about 4% of blacks being free in the country. That's why at the time of the Civil War, 4% of blacks were free. The other 96% were still enslaved. Because they could not afford to have that many free blacks running around. The thing that was most fearful of whites was to have uncontrolled large numbers of black folk. Because they were not being monitored and controlled. So,
And Doc,
yes, sir.
because this is part of the weekend, and you said some stuff that's just reason I think we decided. You keep saying blacks, white, blacks, white. I think I hear it. I just want to be clear. You're talking about male.
Right, that's right. See, the male is the lowest of the lowest. That's what I try to put this little thing in.
Yeah.
See, whenever I talk about groups, you are the lowest of the low. Okay? And in group structures, our race is the lowest of the low.
So there is a sense in which, with all of this scheming and conniving, the black woman ain't on his mind.
No, not threat. No threat. No threat. Absolutely no threat. She could threaten if she had a 44 in her hand. There's no threat. Black women do not intimidate white males. Never has. As a matter of fact, there was a custom in the South that by the time a white male got to be 14, he had a bar mitzvah, he should come to be with a black woman and have a black mistress. Never been a problem to them. But black women, some of my friends, they asked me to be a spokesperson in Seattle, Washington, in about 3 months at the Black National Caucus for Women. I keep telling the same issue. The issue is not you, it's the black man they're after. That's the guy they're after, and they want to hurt. Because he has a potential threat. But a lot of my sisters, see, they get this sisterhood stuff, they try to push their own wagon at the expense of their own people. And what I'm saying to them is that the issues are totally different. They're totally different. Let me take about 2 seconds to get back to my chart. But let me say, the difference is, black people, I told you in that public policy, black folk were defined historically to be producers of labor for wealth and comfort of white folk. Never forget that. You came here to produce, to be a labor force for the personal comfort and wealth building of white folk, primarily black men. Produce labor. So men, black men were to be producers of wealth and comfort for the white labor. But again, I told you in 1638, the law says, but black folks should never what? Enjoy the fruits of white society. So you could never enjoy anything. So you were excluded from enjoying. It is just the opposite. You hear white women or white women, any woman raise an issue about that, it's just the opposite. Their problems are just the opposite. That's why I say you can't mix apples and oranges. The problem with women was that they were denied the opportunity to be producers. See, in other words, women were told to stay home, walk around, look good, keep the house. You didn't have to work. Women were denied the opportunity to produce, just the opposite of what black men were doing. They were denied the opportunity to produce, but they had the option to always enjoy the fruits of anybody's labor. That's what I'm telling you. Women could enjoy the fruits of anybody's labor. They could live and look good. If he's a millionaire, he has to get a liquor work the rest of his life. Whatever a man brought, whatever color the man was, a woman had access to enjoy whatever he enjoyed. She put her feet on the same table, slept in the same house, slept in the same bed, went to the same church. Whether she worked or not. But a black person, a black man was just the opposite. I don't care what he did. He was to be worked to death, but he was never going to be permitted to enjoy anything. So you ought to remember that when you hear people talk about sex issues and race. So what the white man's done now is put her issues over yours. Make sure that your conditions never change. Yes, sir.
Isn't it true that they had the black male and then the black man?
I'm sorry?
When they had the black male, they used to say, first you're a male, then you're a black man. They might have thought and begin to think was considered a black man. In other words, if you did think he was a black male.
Yes, well, when you get it, Francis Weston can get into a lot of that for you in some of more physical, sociological behavior patterns of black people in white society. But that's what they were after. So they kept in this pattern rev to make sure that black men were just producers, be a labor force, but he could never enjoy anything. And that's why the South enlisted and castrated all those black men. So you ain't gonna enjoy the white woman, you ain't gonna enjoy anything. You're gonna live in poor housing, you're gonna be excluded, you're gonna be in prison. And in Bermuda, 96% of the prisoners are due to black men. In the United States, period, 96% of all the blacks in prison are black men. Not women, black men. So black men are denied they must be producers, never enjoyers of comfort. Women or to be enjoyers of comfort, but never they don't necessarily have to produce.
What are some of the, you mentioned sexism as the issue being put on the list.
Okay.
But what are some of the other, I guess, real devious ways that the racist works to separate, to use the black woman against the black man?
Okay. Good question, Greg. Sharp this morning. This interests you. I should ask you, this is a big interest, isn't it?
And the primary reason is I'm the pastor of a church that historically has been black women. And in my move to bring in black men, the problems that I encounter,
Okay. Now, what they did was that the white man then made the black woman more acceptable, more palatable. So in this process, in this process, he made, by setting this kind of stair-stepping, he made the black woman more acceptable. So the first thing he did on the plantation was he would say, well, the white woman, the white master is in charge. The white man is the highest. The white man is the highest on the ladder. Next down would be the white mistress, the white woman. Now, in her absence, guess what they put in? Black woman. See, a black woman, a strong black woman, was put in as the third most powerful person on the plantation, Rev. To answer your question, she became the third most powerful person in the whole culture. Not the black man. She ran the house. She ran the plantation. She kept everything organized. She managed the house. When the white masters and the white business was out of the house, she ran it. Also, she was over everything in the fields too. She was over everything around that house, outside, the garden, the animals, everything. She was the top person. Thirdly, in the fields, black women were put in as what we call slave drivers. Sometimes you might call them straw bosses. She was the person who set the tempo on how fast the men were to work. That's what I'm telling you. The black woman set the tempo. Just like today, the black woman would set the tempo in the home for how fast that black man is going to work and how long he's going to work. Thirdly, that was a mean thing. Women be looking for him. Thirdly, black women were put into some of the softer, more plush jobs. If there are plush jobs on this plantation, she got it. Like, for instance, she was put in charge of being like we call trash gangs. A trash gang meant she went around with children. See, she was responsible for the children. And she took those children, went in the field, and picked up all the grass, the holes up, the bushes, and throw them in the back of the truck. Just picked up around in the fields where the black man was working. But all the dirty, hard, laborious work, where black men were losing their legs and arms every day with machines and tools and doing stuff. And when you're picking that cotton, you had to pick 200 to 300 pounds of cotton a day, sticking your hand into those bowls, where split their hands wide open, because they're hard like razors. They had to pick with such rapidity and not hit those razor blades. You must do that all the days of your life. A man's hands are all cut up, just bleeding, blow up, swollen, scarred, tissue. That was a black man. Thirdly, or fourthly, the black woman could always be a personal comfort to the white man as a mistress. Because when the white woman all of a sudden decided she didn't want more children, or the white man didn't want to abuse her body, he went out and got him a black mistress. to have children. And so she was protected, and when she got those black children, that black woman got increased status because that black man was a little more kinder to his own children and to that mistress. But the black man was not interested in going out and doing anything with that black man in the field. Am I giving you a feel for that? So they have a very special ranking in jobs, responsibilities, and comfort and everything else in the races of whites and black men. And later on, when sharecropping started, the black folk picked that up. And they said, now I'm going to do the same thing the white master's done. So they began, the white, free blacks, emancipated blacks, they then started allowing their wives to start imitating white women. They set up a little culture, they go around and try to dress like it. And whites started criticizing, saying, going around trying to pretend you're white. So white women then had a chance to start holding little tea clubs. And also, the white men and the family made a decision that if someone had to be educated, it would be the girls that would go off to school. But the black boys had to stay and work the fields. Okay? So you got an educational level, a class level developed, where the girls could always go up and get an education and learn how to do certain things. They go off to what we call prepping school, learn how to be a mistress, how to be a lady. Nobody set up school.
Right.
You go out and set a black man how to be something and be a black man. See, nobody had an interest in teaching him how to be a black man, but those families taught, sent those white, particular girls off to special schools, prepping schools, to learn how to be a lady. Am I answering the question? See, and all that is still flowed up to the day. And to this day, I doubt that most black young men, anybody is caring about teaching them how to be a man. And so that system has flowed all the way down. Yes, sir, I'm going to run so I get through. I got tons of stuff for you. But you talk about when you get the other kind of problem now, about what's happened to a lot of black boys and black men today, is that the black man is trying to exercise only power. He has no, in other words, he's been reduced down to a level where he has no personal value. You strip him of his hopes and his values, so now he feels that everything you own also has no value. He's without hope. And that's why right now they take your life and everybody else's life. He doesn't care about it anymore. You got another kind of problem we can talk about a little later on. You cannot strip people of their dignity and their pride. You cannot strip them. See, they're not foolish. You strip the black kids of everything they got. I told you a few minutes ago, we have a 57% black unemployment rate. You cannot tell him that he has to go out and get a job earning minimum wage, for instance, and he can't even survive off that. That's $2,000 below poverty level. He worked full time at that job. That's a lot. That's another kind of problem. We talked about all that, okay? But you got other problems feeding in now. We go a little fast. I just put in again about how blacks are exposed, to show you every situation a black person squealed. Louisiana Territory came in for the same reason. We acquired everything west of the Mississippi, not because white folks have done something fantastic. That land was bought for $5 million from France. The reason it was bought for $5 million was because Toussaint Overture, a black man in Haiti, beat the devil out of France and destroyed their army, and France had planned on developing that part of the country themselves. France had planned on building a whole nation on the other side of the Mississippi River. But they couldn't build it because a black man's little ragtag army down in Haiti beat the devil out of it. And so then they said, well, we just sell the land in the United States for $5 million. That's how the Louisiana Territory came into existence. But you won't find it in the history books. That's why it came in. The price of slaves, again, after slave trade again, and the price of slaves started going up. So what they started doing in this country, they started breeding their own. So they started bringing in more black women at this point. Black women started coming into the country in mass at this point. And all kind of new businesses started developing around the country called raise your own. And so along the eastern, in states like Virginia, North Carolina, those old colony states, where we used to raise tobacco, they quit raising tobacco and started raising slaves because they could make more money off of them than they could. Than they could raise tobacco. So the price of slaves now started going straight up. Denmark recently again, he tried to pull a revolt, blacks squeal on him, some black guy, Meritorious, manumission again. Congress enacted the selling of land in the Northwest. They started selling land again, passed laws, blacks could not own any land. Again, exploitation of black art form again, about 1830s. In certain parts of the country, like Louisiana, Memphis, stuff like that, blacks began to develop their own little culture at this point in time, in particularly in music. And there's one black guy, I can't remember his name right now. It's a white guy. He saw a black kid dancing on the street. They started imitating blacks at this point. Also, at this point, very important for you in religious context, this was about the time that they began to let blacks, as the speaker last night said, let blacks have their own religious ceremonies. Up this time, they were watching monitoring blacks. I told you earlier, they always said this monitoring system, like the census, know what blacks are doing. In the 1830s, the first time they started telling blacks, you know, now have your own religious ceremonies on Sunday, and blah, blah, blah. Up to that time, you had to have a white person present. And when they told them again at this point, between 1830s and 1840s, that if you hold those sermons, that the minister got a responsibility. You got a responsibility to teach you, first of all, that the Bible talked about the master, it talked about the white master, not anybody in heaven. Secondly, that you were to accept your present conditions on earth, be satisfied with it. And thirdly, that the minister had an obligation to teach you pie in the sky. That you're going to get yours in the year after, okay?
You must have a white person.
Yeah, see, yeah, they had the images then. And see, because religions also had, as I said to you earlier, back in the slave codes of 1705, the churches had an obligation to teach your inferiority and your subordination. So anything that was elevated had to contain the whites having it. And up to this point in time, also keep in mind that they were preaching religious inferiority where that the reason that you were enslaved, the church was saying was because you were inferior by God, by godly divine decree. Later on, it's going to change to biological. When we get into the late 1800s, it's going to switch from religious justification, it's going to go to biological justification. That's why the social Darwinism started coming out, saying the black man is the inferior product in a line of human biology. But up to this point, religion had an obligation to teach the black man was inferior because Ham knows in the Bible and stuff. And going back earlier, I told you that when they rewrote the King James Version, they tried to write that into the Bible in 1617. And I told you the blacks came into the country in 1719. The King James authorized slavery of blacks. Remember that? At that point in time in the Bible, they started at that point saying, let's use that as a justification. That's why you get the King James Version of the Bible. They try to justify it out of the Bible. He's the one that authorized it. He's also the one that authorized the slavery in 1617. Right, 2 years before blacks came into the country. Congress passed, again, said again that whites need own land. Just talk about whites own land. Then the gold rush started in 1849. Again, before that started though, about 1846 to 47 in here, they started to fight for the annexation of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, and California that came into the United States, again over slavery. The Alamo was over slavery. Because see what had happened then, 20,000 whites had gone into Texas and was trying to raise cotton in Texas, and they wanted to take slaves with them. And they brought in a whole bunch of slaves. In Mexico at that time owned that land, says Mexico passed a law saying, none of our land can you own slaves. And the United States whites said, no, we're going to raise cotton in Texas, we're bringing our slaves on your land. And so they got in a fight, and you see it on television, John went on, and don't take what they were fighting over. Was whites were trying to use that land to bring slaves and to raise cotton. And so again, Texas, Arizona, and California came into existence because they're fighting over black folk. And the word at that time was called, we need more land to get more land, get more niggas. That was the word at that time for slavery. And when the gold rush started, after they won that little war right quick, gold rush was within 2 years, gold was discovered in California. Everybody rushed out to the gold rush, except 2 people who didn't find gold in California. That was blacks and Indians. Asians came into the country at that point, from China and Japan came in and tried to get into the gold rush. Mexicans came in and joined the gold rush. The only two people that could not look for gold were blacks and Indians. That was very important to remember that. So blacks have created by now 3 gold rushes in the country. Blacks have created a gold rush with tobacco, which most of the countries around the world made all kind of money, got wealthy off. Blacks created a second gold rush, which is also in cotton. It's called white gold. And then you also blacks created the real gold rush, which is called yellow gold, was in California. And the first gold rush, I forgot, was called black gold. And that was when they owned the bodies. That was the first original gold rush for whites, which was black gold, because blacks lose so much money. So they had about 3 or 4 major gold rushes in the country, and each time black folks were excluded to participate in it. That's why we don't have any money, and wealth was going strictly to whites at that point in time. Also, by now, in the United States, you know what happened. Land mass, I indicated to you, in the United States was 2 billion acres of land when the whites came into this country. Indians were running and roaming around 2 billion. We had about 2 billion Indians covering all this land. This land was redistributed to whites. This is how the land was redistributed, just for your information in case you're interested. And again, but keep in mind though, that the land had no value unless it had a slave on it at that point in time. According to President Jackson, a black man brought 75% of the value to the land as a slave. They had no value. So contrary to what white people tell you about they made that one off the land, they didn't. They made it off of blacks. The primary producers of wealth for black people, period. And because land otherwise, nothing could be used to grow on it. Here's the land. So right now they gave away most of the land by public domain, disposed in various ways. That's 1 billion acres of land right here. That's over 140 billion acres of land given away in this section. That went to public use. That's what whites picked it up. They picked it up in various ways. They got it through the Homesteading Act. Whites got it grants to railroads. Some of the biggest land in this country went to railroads. Veterans got a big part of it. But again, as I said in the book, black folk did not get the land. Even though the law says that any veteran of a war could get free land, they denied it to black folk. Blacks did not get land. All the land claims, and in other words, all the land except a little bit went to states. But blacks did not own land because it conveyed status. Because the law said anybody who owns land can vote. And so they said if they deny you ownership of land, then they won't have a problem about you trying to vote. Just for your information, the prices of land and slavery, because I told you land had no value, the two stayed coincided just like that. Wall Street operated off of 2 things, land ownership primarily and also black slavery. But one went up, the other one went up. They stayed parallel. And cotton also stayed pretty closely related to it. As you want to see, the value of slaves kept going up and up and up. And by 1860, again, it peaked out about $1,600 per slave. And so as cotton went up, they always stayed pretty close in alliance. As one went up the other. That's how Wall Street was operating off of. Anybody had a lot of land, they produced cotton and wealth. So by 1860, right here, by 1860, most of the wealth in the country now was concentrated in the South. And that's what triggered your second war, the Civil War, fighting over the background wealth was. Typically in the South, anybody had $100,000 in net worth, over 65% of them were in the South. The difference between a northern farmer and a white southern farmer was that the white farmer in the north, the white farmer in the south, the same material, the white farmer in the south had 91 times more wealth. If he had 100 slaves, it was 400 times more wealth in the south. A typical white person then had a walking express card, Visa card, gave him 1 slave. He never had to work a day in his life. It was humanly impossible for a white person to come to the United States and not get wealthy. Remember this, very important point. Any white immigrants coming to the United States under this structure did not stay poor. It's impossible. Unless you're an extremely extra dumb white person. You could not stay poor. They gave you free land and free labor. With free land and free labor, you had to make money, unless you were extra dumb or lazy. And that's why by 1860, they had invested somewhere around $8 billion just in owning black slaves. Those black slaves then, when Lincoln, they asked Lincoln in 1860 to free slaves, Lincoln said, yes, I will. They said, pay us for it. And Lincoln sent a bill request over to Congress to give reparations to white folk, to pay for those slaves. And they looked and said, how much we run? They figured up $8 billion. They said, we don't even have that kind of money in the United States. They said, right now, if we threw in all the businesses in the United States and government budget all together, it won't come to a fraction of $8 billion. That's what started triggering your war. That's one of the biggest triggers of the war, was that the United States government did not have that kind of money to pay the white slave masters back their money in the South. The second thing was that we had all these immigrants pouring into the country now, white immigrants coming from these different countries, and they could not earn a living because you can't get anything cheaper than free. They couldn't get jobs. See what I'm saying? So they poured into the North. They couldn't compete with slave labor. And so what they said we're going to do then, we're fighting a war to raise the wage scale up from no wage to low wage. That's why blacks went from no wage to low wage in sharecropping. And that gave room then for the immigrants to come into this country and to get in over blacks, like I told you over here. These people had to get into the country. They came into the country to fit it in under this. Whites, yellow, and browns were coming into the country. And you had to be able to pay them a wage in the North. And the North wanted to take over, had all the industries were in the North. The South was just raising the products. The North replaced England in building the factories, textile factories, shoe factories. As a matter of fact, they had a built-in industry. Any white person wanted to make money, he could open up a shoe factory. He had a built-in market. He had 5 million black slaves to sell sandals and brogans to every year. They sold special cloth, like what's called nigger cloth, the rubber cloth, the kind of cloth they would typically throw away. They made clothing for black folks, slaves. So any white person going into those industries, all the shipping industries, insurance industries, were all designed to make wealthy white folks off the black folks as slaves. And so these people came into the country to make money. They had to free some of that up, create a room so they can make an income, because you can't work as a kid, you can't work cheaper than the black. Now also at this one time, England tried to enter the Civil War. I meant to tell you that too. England did try to send money over on the side of the South to keep from breaking slavery. So England and the Indians joined with the South to maintain slavery because they had control of the products. But the North wanted to get free because the North wanted to transplant all that wealth up to the North, point one. 2, they want to be able to bring in more immigrants, be able to pay them a salary. And 3, they want to take the folks off the South and try to redevelop the West. Okay? And that's what created the Civil War. After the Civil War, let me run a little fast. I don't want to lose you, I got to get through this. Okay. After the Civil War, let's see. I talked about this already, about John Brown's radar atmosphere, heard about that time. Also about this time, the book called Uncle Tom's Cabin was written. And we're trying to show you how blacks are being treated in the country. And in that book, after that book was written, whites flipped it around the other way. Uncle Tom was not a bad character in that story. Uncle Tom was a very strong black man, a very religious black man that stood up against white master Simon Legree and said, some things I would not do even if I'm a slave. I would not commit meritorious manumission. That's what I'm telling you. I would not squeal along people tell you where the slaves are hiding. Point 2, I would not beat my fellow slaves, make them work in the class and do some money for you. And 3, I would not give you all the extra honors that you wanted as slave master. So what Simon Legree did, he had his meritorious manumitted slave drillers, slave drivers, to beat him on a regular basis. He appointed 2 blacks to do it. One was called Sambo and Kimbo. Okay? Sambo then would beat Uncle Tom on a regular basis. They beat him to death. And because he fitted that image of the black that would do it his own people, and that became a Sambo. So the guy you need to worry about in this issue was not Uncle Tom, it's Sambo. And this color person, Uncle Tom, was really called him a complimentary name, because he was a black man that stood up against white folk. And nowadays, the white folk didn't want that image of a black man standing up against white folk, so they flipped it upside down. And so if you see somebody now who's selling people out, don't pay him a compliment by calling him Uncle Tom. Call him Sambo, whatever it is. Sharecropping system started in 1862. They started sharecropping. They moved from low wage, from no wage to low wage on black folks. 1863, they signed the proclamation. It was enacted, got out by 64. In 13, 14, 15, the amendment were enacted. In 1865, they gave blacks civil rights. 13th Amendment of freedom, 14 gave them due process, and 15 gave them the right to vote. Those things came into effect in 1865. By 1867, so they were taken away from them. Because black folks, see, what black folks fail to understand is that those things had no power to them. They had no power. They had no influence. So, and worst of all, is that you were the only person that needed this. See, if civil rights had power, black folks would be the most powerful people in this country. And since we've enacted the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment revenue, we have enacted 11 other civil rights laws. And black folks still doing it. And black folks right now, Jessica Jackson's group, they still don't feel some sense of embarrassment that every 8 to 10 years you have to go downtown and get your civil rights renewed, like the damn driver's license. And they don't feel embarrassed doing it. I tell the black folks, quit chasing civil rights. You know, if you don't see the Indians chasing it, no Asians chasing it, and big meat, why are you chasing civil rights? Go get yourself some money and power. But I still find all my folks, well, we got to have these civil rights. And what I'm saying is, if you're going to chase civil rights, and you're going to do wrong, at least do wrong right. If you're going to talk about civil rights, talk about it like the other groups talk about it. Veterans talk about veterans' rights, handicapped about handicapped rights, women about women's rights, Asian about Asian rights, Hispanics about Hispanic rights, gay about gay rights. Why do black folk talk about civil rights? What happened to black rights? If you're going to talk about civil rights, what black person don't name civil? Talk about black rights. But even more important than that, talk about economic rights. And because of this thing, you chase the wrong thing. So by the turn of the century, black folks have been locked in again to a labor class. Now they're known as sharecroppers. Their labor was again needed, so the North sold them out into sharecropping. Okay, sold them out, the blacks got locked in again, but whites still need their labor. By the turn of the century, by the turn of the century, black folk then brought in their own organizations, the NAACP and Urban League. And unlike the Jews who come into the country, they started their own organizations. Their Jewish organizations were looking for economic power and money. Blacks started their organizations, the Urban League and the NAACP. They were looking for equal employment opportunities and jobs. You see the difference? Again, they called into their public policy about blacks going to be labor for the personal wealth building and comfort of white society. So again, they've been looking for jobs. Jobs don't create anything for you in the capitalistic society. You get 6 to 9 times more wealth by owning a business than you will working a job. The only thing a job does for you is keep you one payday or 1 week away from a paycheck, unemployment line, or starvation. You're always expendable. But the NAACP really locked us again into the labor class. So by 1920s, for instance, right after World War I, what we found shortly after World War I was that 90% of all the black people in the United States were still doing the same thing their parents were doing 300 years before. You were still working in the cotton fields of the South and in the fields of the South for the white man. That's only 70 years ago. Nothing had changed for black folk. And a few black folk tried to get slick and say, well, I'm going to start to be competitive with white folks and violate that public policy about black folk being labor on my own land. And after World War I, white folks would go around to black farms. They were poisoning their animals, set their fields on fire, pour kerosene and gasoline on that cotton. So then blacks, right after World War I, by 1920, started rushing north. They started running up to Washington, D.C., Detroit, New York, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, trying to get out of the South. Because you see what had happened also was technology got the black folk. Average black person in the 1920s could pick 20 pounds of cotton an hour. White men invented a machine that could pick 1,000 pounds of cotton an hour. So black folk were made obsolete and they ran out of the South. They started the Harlem Renaissance, came into Harlem, set up Harlem men, running from the South trying to find, because technology was right behind them. Black folk were now being chased by technology, becoming obsolete. So they ran into the North. Throughout the 30s and 40s, we had the greatest number of people moving in this country, in the history of the country. Blacks moved out of the South in massive numbers up north. They moved into those factories, automobile factories, steel plants, meat packing companies. Then by the mid-1950s and 60s, by 1960s, something else happened again. All of a sudden, technology caught them, nailed them to the wall in the corner. And all of a sudden, black folks said, you got me again. And Martin Luther King was running around the country saying, free at last, thank God we're free at last. He was not talking about black folk. You saw my white folk. For the first time in the history of this nation, white folk became free of the need for black folks' labor. This is where we're going to start talking about our issues very quickly. Because at one time, black folk became obsolete. You became obsolete not necessarily paid in the posterior. And white folks said, now we got to change that public policy because we no longer need these people. Thank God for Martin Luther King. We're free. And black folks never knew this when all the sandbagging and handshakes start changing. And we bought wooden horses again and dogs that won't hunt. Yes, ma'am. Very clearly. And to a great degree, I have to give credit to Booker T. Washington, Garvey, Woodson, and Du Bois. They all did the best they could in a small context. All of them had something that was good. And, but as a whole, all of them had something that was bad. Booker T. Washington had some good ideas about build your own people, train your own people, take care of your own community, drop your buckets where you are. But he did some other things. He got caught in the Meritorious manumission, selling his people out. That's what he did the other day in 1895. He gave that speech in Atlanta.
So will you kind of put that in the context of that time?
Yes, I do.
Blacks didn't have any rights, white folks brought on the stage.
Yeah.
And he was a lead.
He was a leader.
He was a manipulator. He understood the situation.
Yeah.
He was a Republican of the North. He was a Democrat down south. He tried to save the system.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
At the period of time, all these people were just doing for that period. And they forgot to make it into a question.
Yes, it did. See, all of them. See, that's why I say I have to give them all credit. Because if I'd have been at a certain time, I might have done the same thing. I'm not saying it's hard for me to second guess what I would have done in a similar situation and condemn them. I don't want to do that. Because if I was wearing those shoes at that particular time, I'm not sure what I would have done. And so I can't condemn Booker T. Washington. I think he maybe did the best he could with the circumstances he had. And even though some others condemned him, like Potter and Du Bois and others. Right. Yeah. Right. And that's what I'm saying. At the same time, I give Du Bois credit because Du Bois was stressing something else. But we need, see what the bottom line is, we need all those pieces. See, we need all the pieces. And that's why I don't want people condemning my people without having lived through it. And what I would ideally want to do in our institute is that we line up all the things that Trotter was talking about, and Du Bois was talking about, and Garvey was talking about, and Woodson was talking about, or all of it, and just take the best off the top. And what we try to do in the institute that we started in Washington is just take the best of what we got from all our people, all their sayings, all of these contributions. I can't think of it. Except the Meritorious manumitted blacks, I can't think of everybody's made contributions. And I'm not trying to avoid the question. I just want to get caught and criticizing the black person. Yeah.
It was priced like made him yo-yo. And then they took the key because I was still a couple years ago. Jewish scholars around the Library of Congress who had $5 million grant to write Booker T out of his book.
Yeah.
Booker T, the writing was more extensive than the rest, and most people in the country or the Library of Congress.
Right, and see, and you're right. See, another thing is that the thing that they used most viciously against Booker T. Washington was the Atlanta speech. And see, and even if we were to say, oh, he made a mistake. Let's say he made a mistake the way he made the speech, because whites immediately jumped on it like flies and honey, and they said, oh, we got what we need, and the whole thing about the fingers. So they used that against him, and even Booker T. before he died in about 1990, he went back and wrote in one of those things. He admitted, he said, well, I think I made a mistake. I thought white people would do better by my people. And he admitted that maybe he should have said that, but that doesn't make Booker T. Washington bad because he's a human being. And he says what he thinks is appropriate, but sometimes the white folks take advantage of it. You can't hold him totally responsible for it. And the same thing with, there's some things that Du Bois said that later on can be twisted against black folk. But none of those individuals, I think, went out of their way to do black folk in. See, Garvey didn't do it, Woodson didn't do it, and so I try to tell black folks, quit riding the wrong horse, you know? Go get Uncle Tom. I mean, go get Samuel and get Uncle Tom back. But we like to pick every black clean and say, why weren't they perfect? No, they weren't perfect people. They've been denied education, denied resources. Most of them are struggling, trying to figure out which way do I go? How can I best get there? And sometimes I'm walk down the wrong road. And they did a lot of confess places. I made the wrong turn. I hurt my people. I'm sorry. Yes, whoever.
And I'll say that what we have to be very aware of is that the seasoning process that was done in the Caribbean, I think there was a version of the carried over here that we call education.
Right.
And education usually means I've read all the white classics. I speak from the vocabulary of white folk. I can think on the level of white folk. And therefore, whatever the white media writes and picks out, such as the Atlanta speech, we jump on that horse also.
You're right, absolutely right.
And we wind up arguing, white folks arguing against black folks.
Right.
And we are black folks. It's like working on these jobs, and somebody says, well, what do you think about Colin Ferguson? Hell, I understand it. That's a shame. I understand it. And we've got to be careful about what we call being intelligent.
You're right. And you're absolutely right. Because white media will pick up on anything they can use to divide black folk and use it against another black person. And they use it as a stick against your own people. That's why I try to never say anything, even though I know I'm going to do it inadvertently once in a while. I just hope my people is kind and forgiving when I make mistakes. But I'm always trying to do the best I can with it. I'm sure long after I've gone, somebody says, Dr. Anderson went all this country said this and that. He was against black folk, you know. They did do a lot in cooperating. So their differences were more philosophical. One was stressing more hand-on business kind of involvement, and the biggest difference was that Du Bois wanted to stress the politics and scholarly achievement. And Du Bois was an extremely brilliant scholar, one of the best that we had. And consequently, all people like to focus on that which they do best. And he was a bright scholar, a brilliant man, and Du Bois was trying to carve a long-range plan for us. And what he's saying is that let's draw up a comprehensive plan and learn how to play politics with white folk and beat them. Some of the things we're trying to do in the Institute. And let's develop our best talent, our best skills, the best of our people, our human capital to go after. And one thing that Booker T was saying, let's build our businesses, let's develop our manual skills and take care of that. So they were just arguing about philosophical differences. Well, let me jump to this very quickly. In this country, this is what controls where you are in a society. This is what controls people along in modern day information. Is that they set up immigration laws in this country that they use to establish public policy on anything that goes down. And this is it, right here. Skin color, the color gradations never change. Straight up and down, white, it keeps getting darker. And coming into this country, this is the way they operate. English, Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, Middle East, Far East, Hispanic, and African. Okay? And that's how your resources are distributed in the country. I told you initially there's a monopoly on the distribution of power, wealth, resources, and income. This is how it flows. It flows along lines. They they assign special preferential treatment also on religion for the good railroad here too. They also set that up for you all on which they prioritize that. And that's why the Jews down here that's why they always run and duck and dodge. But down in here also they set up quotas. And I just took the quota right out of this 86th Congress session of doctors. I just took all that out to show you how that operates, okay? And that's why you can't get Haitians into the country because this thing here is closed. Okay? And so you notice this, so it goes from, see the difference from open to what? Closed. That's why any person coming in from England or Ireland, they come in anytime they want. ain't worried about anything. Never have. And then we get it, but now what they've done to you in 1966, this sort of new slickness they got on you. I'm sure you the new slickness you got. I want you to watch this. Again, right now through that line, you get down here between, after you get past Brown. So what they're doing now at this point here is that all these groups are against this last column. And now that all these individuals from here up, they're classified now, they have the option to classify themselves as whites. So if you go down and look at your 1990 census, anybody coming in from Pakistan, from the Asian countries, or Hispanics now call themselves whites. As a matter of fact, they got a new term now. So I got my good friend, I should pick on Jesse. I got a lot of people going around saying, well, you know, color, they're going to take over Earth, but they don't won't happen. And the same thing with they deal with the Indians, they have to do it with the rest of these groups. They're given the incentives for those groups to identify with whites up. You don't have anything to offer them to go down. So don't believe it's business about this. They say, well, 3/4 people on the earth are color, so we're going to take over. No, it happened. Never happened. They got it rigged, so it never happened. It's going to go up. And the reason incentives now is that all the people from the ground up identifying, they got a new term now. You might hear what's called white Hispanics. Y'all heard that term now? How many people heard that term? Raise your hand. See all those hands up? That's what that means. That's this new slick code. Okay? Yes, sir.
Even down to my numbers, 5. 6 is a black man. 5 is brown, not too dark, but in between. 4, and then go to 1 is white.
Hey, that man's keeping up with me. That's a new scheme. So you hear somehow people talking this hogwash, about, well, we all colored, no, forget that. It's going to be us against all the rest. Okay? And any Arab comes to this country, like one in Detroit, Michigan, it's blacks against Arabs and Chaldeans. I go into California, it's blacks against Vietnamese and North Koreans. I go into Miami, it's going to be blacks against Cubans and some other group. I know I should have given you all the rest of some of you young. I should have given you a break on this. But all around the country, it's going to be blacks against some groups, okay? Because all those groups are going to identify with these groups. They're going to accept their values. They're going to become conservative. They're going to vote the same way. And don't depend on any support for them for anything. As a matter of fact, I don't know if there's support from them. They won't even hire you. None of them going to hire you in that job. Okay? If any of these groups in here have employment opportunities, for instance, I go to Benny Hunter's, or let's say a Chinese restaurant, you're not going to find any black folks who quit looking for it. They're going to hire their own people, use their own culture. You're going to a Mexican restaurant, it'll be all Mexicans. The only people right now that hire blacks in this country is this group up here. Whites. Whites will hire blacks. The rest are not going to hire you. They're in competition with you. They plan on tearing you up. Okay?
And their understanding of us comes from.
That's right. They've learned how to treat you. They know how to treat you. They're taking over. I go to Detroit, Michigan. I go down there and find this group, for instance, here. They're going to take over all the 7-Elevens in the black neighborhoods. They're going to take over the grocery stores and the gas stations. I don't know about New York. That's what they're going after. Okay? These groups up here, this group, the Jews in here, they're going to go after the garment districts, the banking industry, and the professions. This group in here, they went after the Irish, they would go after the liquor establishment, the bars, the distilleries, and the police departments. The Italians came over here, they went after the fire departments, the shipping yards, and the unions. Everybody went after something to exercise control of their culture, their employment, their money, except black people. Because you're at the bottom, they let you take over anything. The only thing we had a chance to take over was sports and entertainment, and we blew that. And even though we got all these blacks right now running around the country, 85% of the basketball players are black, 75% of the professional boxers are black, 63% of the football players are black, and 54% of the baseball players are black, and blacks don't own nothing. They're labor. They're still labor. I can believe that and say, who owns the teams? Who owns the concessions? Who owns the stadiums? Now I go right now. I did not mention one black athlete. I did not mention one Asian athlete. When I go watch who's manufacturing equipment and all the uniforms, it's coming out of Taiwan, Korea, Formosa, Hong Kong, the Philippines. And I got a black man running around advertising Nike shoes. Say it, bro. Actually, black kids to pay $150 a pair for them, so you can go into Taiwan, Korea, Formosa. And what I'm saying to you, you've got to stop it. Time is around, so you got to tell Michael Jordan, no, you ain't taking no more money out of the black community and giving it to the other groups. When we was out there struggling at the bottom, with not in the power, in power, the same way we were in 1830, and you're going to ask the black folk to play the game and lose. No power, no wealth, own nothing, no business, no stores, buying everything from the rest of these groups. And what I'm saying today, we started talking about economic development. You've got to stop spending your money out of your community. 95% of every dollar a black person spends goes outside of this community to these groups.
Exactly.
We have an annual disposable income of approximately $120 billion annually. That makes us the 9th richest nation on earth. We are richer than Sweden, Australia, Pakistan, India, Canada, foremost, and all the black African countries put together. And we're the poorest people on earth. Out of 163 nations, we are richer than all of them but 9. And we own absolutely nothing. I go into those countries, they own armies, factories, radio stations, TV stations. Look what Canada owns. Look what Pakistan owns as a nation. We got more money than them, we own nothing. Because we spend 95% of our money outside of our communities. We keep 5% inside the black community. Out of 5% we keep in our communities, 3% of that goes to these groups that hate our guts. 3% goes to them. We are left with less than 2%. And out of the 2% we left with, we put it in the white bank, they won't give you a loan. And so now you're bankrupt. You're the only people on earth that go bankrupt every 24 hours. You go bankrupt as regular as a clock. Nobody on earth going to take you serious when they know you'll go bankrupt 24 hours later. You should be ashamed of yourself as a people. And why are white folks kicking our brains out? Because they're living off of dual incomes. They're living off of 100% of their money and 95% of ours. And we are struggling off of 2%, running around saying, why do black folk look poor in New York? Why don't the people respect us? In American capitalism, I told you back in the beginning of this presentation, in the 1400s, that to define value, capitalism defines value off of what you own, what you are worth. When you go into a bank, the first thing it asks you is to fill out a personal net worth statement. He said, fill out a personal net worth statement. What are you worth personally? When you use the expression, John F. Kennedy is worth, Henry Ford is worth, Ross Perot is worth. You see what I'm doing? Then when it's black people and my people, if you don't have less than 2%, that's why a white redneck say you ain't worth 2 cents. Because that's all you own. What you own is how you define. If you don't own anything, you aren't worth anything in capitalism. And that's why you're obsolete, you're expendable. That's why I leave here and go down and cry when I go by the metro stop, the Amtrak station, see black folks sleeping on the street, drugged out, whined out, doped out, living in cardboard boxes. You aren't worth anything because you don't own anything. You should go home every night and cry with your people. And every time you spend your money, you put a gun in there and blow your own brains out. Leave here today, I want you to look in your wallet and do me a favor. And say, before Dr. Anderson, I'm going to look at my wallet. I'm going to take out every dollar I have, put a check mark on it. Because there's a basic premise that says, never let your money lose your hands or leave your community without having passed through another black hand at least 8 to 12 times. It must bounce 8 to 12 times. Black money does not bounce one time. As soon as a black person gets paid, he runs straight to a white store and a white suburb and a white home and blows his own brains out right in the middle of the mall.
I need you, I'm probably going to interrupt what you plan. religion without a doubt has been tampered, particularly the Christian faith. You just emphatically said something that we experience every day, and that is we are whatever we are worth. That's right. Now, King James says, a man's life consists in knowledge, the abundance of things which he possesses. Right? Personally, as Johnny knows, I am very willing to believe that King James tampered with that. Ain't got no problem. But you see, if I stood in my pulpit and preached that, I got folk who would swear I'm on my way to hell. All right? Or that I am walking the gospel. You understand?
Yes,
but
I
at the same time, if furthermore, when I listen to that and feel it out in my own spirit and gut, I understand why the church, just like ordinary life, as a conglomerate, is only 24 hours away from bankruptcy.
That's right.
And it's why we steal from the Lord and don't understand that in stealing from the Lord, we steal from ourselves.
You got to figure that.
King James put that shit in the Bible.
Right.
So we could believe that shit, and here we are still waiting on pie in the sky.
That's right. Rev got it right. And see, Rev just hit the nail on the head. That's why I respect the man. I just met him yesterday. And I've heard wonderful things about it. Because he also knows some things they missed in the Bible. He knows from his experience with the Bible scriptures that, for instance, throughout there were wealthy individuals in the Bible. Solomon had all kinds of money. And you don't see anything in the Bible saying Solomon was condemned by God.
And the promised land was terra firma.
Thank you. You don't see, as a matter of fact, I don't know whether it's Matthew or what now. You all probably much more, maybe, where it talked about the talent. You know that? And it gave you as close, and they missed that in the Bible. It told you very specifically that where different individuals were given a different amount of wealth by the master. Remember that? And he said they went out and they came back. Went to a distant land and came back. One had something like maybe 5 talents, whatever the number was. He had multiplied it. And came and said, Lord, whatever you gave me, I took it and I multiplied it. I made more money with it. Another had something like maybe 2 talents. He said, Lord, you gave me 2 talents. I went off and multiplied it. Here's it for you. One had something like maybe 1 talent. And this fool took his part and said, well, you didn't give me anything. I don't play. I just been buried mine. Why should I do anything? Because I know that you don't like people making wealth, reading the stuff.
That's the point. No, all that other stuff you said was all right. But that point, when you said, he said to the man who gave you the talent, you don't like people making wealth. And there are those of us who feel that poverty is a virtue.
Oh, God. Well, I think you really believe that.
Poor people are going to heaven, and rich folk are going to hell.
That's sad. You know why? Because that comes from the Jewish religion, and every Jew I know, I got Jewish partners in my business. They spend all that time trying to get money. Now, if they're that close, they're the chosen people. Why would they be? No. See, somebody ain't thinking right. See, Rev knows more about this than I do, obviously. But somebody's not thinking right. They're telling Rev that stuff. They know in his heart, as devoted as the man is, that poor people cannot help poor people. Let me tell you, if I put you in a hole in life, and I'm as poor and as incapable and as competent as you are, and I'm in that same hole, I can do make you feel good. And if I'm in a hole in life, don't make me feel good. Get me the hell out. And if you get out, you got to go get something and bring your posterior back and help me. And I'm sick and tired of black folk seeing people in holes, trying to make them feel good in poverty, trying to comfort them in poverty. Go get something and feed my people. And clothes. You know they got to have clothes on their back. They get hungry, tired, and cold. Go get something. Quit trying to make them feel good. Say, well, you get yours in the by and by. No, let them have something here and get something to buy and buy too. The Bible does not say that you got to be poor. Now, what the white slave masters told us is that you teach black folk that they'll get theirs now, don't be bothered white folks and people with white folks. I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, no, I don't be sorry. No, I'm happy that you're here to say it. Because, the folk need to hear it from another voice. And plus, I need it. I'm not just talking about people, but I need it. But there are two things, and I'm being helpful because my own premise, my own way of seeing the scriptures for now. Heaven is a wonderful place, I'm pretty sure, but I ain't been there yet. And, every night I got some question about whether I'm going because of the mother. But in terms of pragmatic, one of the things that always fascinates me is some of the stuff in the Bible that we don't read. Oh, thank you. All right. Some of the stuff in the Bible that we don't read. I'm always fascinated by Abraham, who's the father of the faithful, who tricked two kings out of some money, lying about his wife. And all of this is said he was directed by God in all of this. And when the kings found out he was lying, he left and didn't give nothing back. And then later on we run into Abraham in the book of Luke, in the Gospel of Luke. And Abraham got a poor man named Lazarus in his bosom. And Abraham's bosom was said to be heaven. Oh, see? And then the other thing I'm sitting here thinking about is a key that Jesus gave us on how to deal with this whole business. Is he said, wherever a man's treasure is where his heart is. And therefore, if we make the test, I know you're going to this now, but I'm ready.
You don't talk,
Yeah, but I'm ready for the answer now. You gave us all that stuff this morning. I'm ready for the answer now. But Jesus said, wherever a man's treasure is where his heart is. And if we're going to change this thing, we got to start getting in the heart.
You're absolutely correct. And also in the Bible, one of the things that, as you know, is that there's a Lord's Prayer, which says, conclude by saying what? I will be what? Done where? On earth. Going back to Reb's point again. Also, it is known in the Bible that it says in the final day, in the Revelations, when man goes back again, that it shall be like it was in Noah's time. Noah did not inherit heaven. Noah came where? Back to the earth. When it says, I will be done on earth. What you have to be very careful about is that if you start telling our people they're going to get theirs in high and by in the sky, that's not what the Bible is saying. The Bible says that the final day will be like it was in Noah's time, and that man shall inherit the earth. You shall inherit the earth. It didn't say you were going to heaven. What it says is there's a small number, the mark of the Lamb on the forehead will go to heaven. Just like everybody gets elected to office, they go to Washington, D.C., but everybody in New York doesn't go to Washington, D.C. Ashes shall inherit the earth. And when you inherit the earth, I want my black.
reparations, we begin to expand the discussion about reparations. The reparations movement is growing around the country, and part of that is as a result of the initiative of Alderman Dorothy Tillman in Chicago, who has held public hearings, and those public hearings have begun to expand, as I said, the discussion about reparations. That's what we want to do here in New York. The oppression of black people has always been viewed from the perspective of the pain that it has caused us as a people. Reparations expands that discussion and looks instead, or looks in addition to those who prospered as a result of our oppression. The slavery, Jim Crow laws, black codes, meritorious manumission, all of that has caused us some pain. However, it has also caused many others to this day great prosperity. It is black labor, white wealth. And so we begin to have that discussion with the larger black community about the very real legacy of our oppression. It's more than just the pain that it has caused us. It is how many other people have absolutely prospered as a result of that racism. Racism has been prosperous for generation after generation. And so the reparations discussion is intended to expand the discussion of our oppression, and then to begin to hold people accountable, not simply for the pain that they have inflicted, although they must be held accountable for that, but also to repair the damage that the oppression has done, and to hold them accountable for how they have prospered as a result of the oppression of African people. To be self-published. And Powerlessness is the national plan to empower African Americans. What we're talking about is us first. You know, there are people who are always apologetic for being supportive of their own people. But without apology, we are concerned about black people and have a need to make that clear. Have a need to encourage black people to be courageous enough to stand for the total liberation of black people without being apologetic and trying to include that in the move on behalf of everybody. And so, are you all ready? Come on.
Thank you very much. Let me say good afternoon to you again. Glad to see all of you and love all of you. And it is my people come together. That excites me. And I want to thank my friend Bob Ball and for inviting me here and leading me at the terminal. Found a way to get here.
Oh yeah, so I'm looking for you.
And she's still hanging strong, even though there's been a lot of threats on her life too. Y'all might know that. So when this becomes the city, y'all protect her. No, they're trying to threaten her about even pushing anything for black folks. And I also thank my friend Leonard Jeffries, and Leonard took you through a lot of history. And what I'll do is try to cut down the time, keep down the time, rather than give you a long, blown out thing. I'll just try to pick up a few points and pick up some of the things that Jeffries was talking about. Now, I heard it mentioned 2 or 3 times that, and my friend Dorothy said it, that she thought for sure that based on where we were, that we would get reparations. I'm going to be a little more forceful than that and tell you that it's absolutely a necessity that you must get reparations. You understand what I'm saying? And what I'm going to talk to you about right now, I'm going to talk about 3 things. The first thing is where we are now. Secondly, what got us here. And thirdly, what we better start doing very quickly to get the hell out of it. Now, first, you must have reparations. I don't care what anybody tells you. And even when Bob said something about some black musician saying that he doesn't want reparations, if you don't get reparations in America, you're through in America. Listen to what I'm telling you all now. You are dead in this country. You haven't got a snowball chance of being competitive people and surviving in America if you don't get reparations. It ain't something that you're nice to have. You better get it. You better get it fast. We are now well on our way in becoming a permanent underclass in America. You're going down. You're going down. And see, we have been the number 2 population in America, the number 2 population now for over 460 years. You're going to get kicked out in the next 2 months. You get kicked out of number 2, you're going down to number 3. The Hispanics going to pass you. The Hispanics going to kick you out of number 2. Now, that's no accident. They've been working on this since 1970 when they took the national plan through the National Hispanic Party to supplant blacks in America by the year 2000. They're not coming here to be your allies. I don't care what any group tells you in this country about allying with Hispanics. I hear that rhetoric all the time. They are not here to ally with you. They're here to supplant you. They're here to replace you. They're here to outcompete you. They're looking for rights, space, and privileges, and they're going to take it out of your hide to get it. The Hispanics are coming to this country to be your competitors. And they're going to take you out in about another 3 months. At that point in time, all the politics in Washington are going to shift. It's going to shift to them. And now anything you get at that point must then come through Hispanics. That's why Bush is married to a Hispanic woman. The first thing he did when he came into office was rush his first trip out of the country was down to Mexico to meet with President Fox. And what they want to do is to open up the boundaries between the United States and Mexico so that that can be a major conduit to bring up more Hispanics. And now the map in Mexico has already been expanded to include California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas as a part of their nation. They're playing a game called recapturing turf, going back to owning land and controlling land in the United States. The only people not playing the game are my folks. You're going down. They're going to take you out. And already in Washington, D.C., we got a few Hispanics that come in Washington, D.C. on Columbia Road. They got more businesses in a black city called Chocolate City, with the 77% black Hispanics have been here 15 years, got more businesses than black folks got. Right. And so they're playing for keeps. We're not playing. We are playing to play. They're playing to win. So that's the first thing that's going to take you out. The second thing is that the air and the age are going to take you out in about another 10 years. They're going to kick you out at number 3. You're going down to number 4. And that one time you must say to yourself, if you got absolutely nothing, after 460 years of being number 2, please use your creative imagination to figure out what the hell you're going to get when you become number 4 in this country. Those people coming here to eat your lunch. Nobody is coming to America to get along with black folks. They're coming here to get over and get ahead. And we keep sitting there helping them do it. By using your organization, your strength, your vision, your sweat, your blood, your labor, and the spirit of all your dead ancestors to raise other people up. When the civil rights movement was going on in this country, those same people in Mexico, Puerto Rico, Peru, Bolivia, having lived a decent life while your people were suffering and dying, and now you're making an equator to your people. Don't do that. Stay away from these terms like minority, multicultural, cultural diversity, poor folks, all that other BS. You got major problems coming. Now, let me go back to what your dilemma is. Bob wants me to tell you what your problem is. You've now got 2 problems in America. Don't listen to the garbage. I don't care if it comes out of a white mouth or a black mouth. They tell you that black folk are progressing in America. They're lying to you. That's bull. Black folk in America are in the same identical position you were in 1860, over 140 years ago. You have not progressed not 1 iota. In 140 years, what you're doing is enjoying the luxury of an illusion of progress on a comparative basis and a proportional terms. You're being lifted up above the rest of the people lifted up in society. You're in the same position. As examples, in 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, in the wealthiest nation in the world, you as the black people, you had 98% in direct slavery, 2% in semi-slavery. At that time, you had 1/2 of 1% of the nation's wealth. And here you are, 140 years later, after all these wars, all these civil rights movements, all these catastrophic events, 140 years later, when you're supposedly 100% free, you still only have 1/2 of 1% of the nation's wealth. Now, if you miss that, let me talk to this side and show you a little difference. You see, maybe you don't understand what I'm talking about. If I were to take another index, or indices, let's take something like employment. In the same period, in 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, I had 99% of all the black people in America being employed by white folks, working for white people to create wealth for white people in their homes, their businesses, their neighborhoods, their communities. That was in the 1860s. You were working 98% for white. Now today, I go around and look around, I still find that 98 to 99% of all the black people in America still working for whites, creating wealth, business opportunities, working their communities, their businesses, their government. You haven't moved. I missed it. Let me go and get this moving. In 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, when black folks were supposedly enslaved in this country, 98% to them semi-slavery. I checked the major cities in America, Cincinnati, Boston, New York, Pennsylvania, Buffalo, and guess what I found? I found over 50% of all the prisoners in the United States that were in slavery were black folks in major urban areas across America. Now I look at it 140 years later. When you claim you're free, and I still find that almost 51% of all blacks in America are still enslaved in prison. That now over 51% of all American prisoners are black folks. And I look at the states, and I got 47% of all the state prisoners are black people. 57% of all the federal prisons are black. 96% of all the prisons in America are black men. And you talk, and if I look at the range, the most productive years for a black man in America between 18 and 35 years of age, when he's supposed to be married and raising children and fulfilling strong black communities, I find that over 40% of all the black men between 18 and 35 years of age are in prison, on parole, and on probation. You haven't got a snowball chance just on that alone. That you got to understand the nature of the problem. Now, what's created the problem is you got two problems in America that create these conditions. Those are symptoms. Those symptoms. You got two problems. One is the maldistribution of wealth that Leonard was talking about, and the other is inappropriate behavior that Leonard was talking about. He called it spiritual. That's inappropriate behavior. This is a maldistribution of wealth. Slavery and Jim Crowism did not happen to you by accident. It was intentionally done to do something. What you all should be asking yourself, what was the purpose of slavery and Jim Crowism? It didn't happen by accident. Don't listen to whites who tell you that slavery was just created by a few white bad boys who just didn't have anything else to do, and white folks didn't benefit. You got a lot of books going around now telling you that white folks didn't get any benefits out of slavery. Now they want you to be pretending you're stupid. They think that somehow whites fought for 400 years to maintain a condition and a system that was not benefiting them. Slavery and Jim Crowism was designed to benefit whites and to disadvantage blacks. That's what it was designed for. Now, what it did, it systematically, socially engineered black folk into the lowest level of a real-life monopoly game. You are playing real-life monopoly. You're playing a game that you cannot win because you do not own, as Leonard said, you don't own enough land, you don't have any money, you don't have any resources. You're playing and you're losing. You're going down so slowly you don't know how you're going down. Now, here's what happened. Slavery and Jim Crowism maldistributed almost 100% of all this nation's wealth, resource, privileges, businesses, controls of all levels of government into the hands of the dominant white society. I'm going to give it to you again so you understand. This slavery and Jim Crow system maldistributed almost 100% of all this nation's resource, privileges, businesses, wealth, controls of all levels of resource and government into the hands of the dominant white society. You do not have enough to be able to compete. That's the problem. Now, I'm going to show you how bad it is. Not only aren't you competitive there, but out of all the wealth that slavery maldistributed to the hands of the dominant white society, 87% is frozen. You can't even touch it. You are playing with a stacked deck. It's like going into a gambling casino where the cards are marked, the dice are loaded. 87% of all the wealth in this nation is now frozen. It is locked into the hands of the dominant white society. It's locked in their hands in terms of stocks, bonds, real estate businesses, and foundations, and insurance policies, and other kinds of things, where it cannot get to black folks. And it shows up in their communities, in their church, their family, their race, their schools, their organizations, which means that every white person has access to it. They can touch what they need any time of the day. They can touch it at will. That means that it is passed on from one generation to the next. That means that a white child, when he's born in this country, the minute he hits the earth, he has everything he needs to be successful except two things. All a white child needs is a scheme in his head to persevere, and he will run into what he needs over and over and over again every day, because it's where he lives, where he's safe, it's in his family, his place, it's in his organization, in his schools, in his churches. He can get it when he wants to, once he comes up with a scheme and goes after it. So consequently, what happens is he's like this movie Forrest Gump. That's what the movie Forrest Gump is about, which says if a white boy, even if he's mentally retarded, if he runs and keeps running in the same direction, running to what he needs to become a multimillionaire. And we're sitting not understand that. But at the same time, a black child hits this earth with square zero. He comes up with nothing. He's competing against a white child that has 87% of what he needs, and you sit there and keep bringing black children in this world playing with zero. Because that black child doesn't inherit anything. When he comes here, he can't have an inherited thing because you don't have any wealth. You have not focused on anything that's inheritable for black children. We spend too much time focusing on welfare, food stamps, drug abuse, teenage pregnancies, public housing, and a job. And a job. You cannot inherit any of those things. You cannot inherit a job. The last thing black folk need is a job. What you need is some money. If you got money, you don't need a job. What you need to do is learn how to get wealth. You must learn how to redistribute the wealth back into your community as fast as you can. And one of the best ways to do it is reparations. We've got to get wealth, we've got to get it quickly. Because without money, without wealth, you can do nothing. It's not civil rights, it's not integration, it's not public law, it's not public policy that defines your opportunities in America. It is wealth. Wealth decides who has the opportunities in America, who's got the power. If you got no wealth, you don't have any. And in black folk, since the circumstances, when I told you we got 1/2 of 1% of the wealth, which means we are less than 2% of the wealth. That's why white racists always saying a nigga ain't worth 2 cents, because you don't have enough wealth and power to be able to fight for yourself. We gotta learn how to get wealth and power fast. You gotta change that structural economic inequity. And to show you how bad it is, let's take it on comparative terms. Out of all the wealth I just mentioned to you, we're talking about $13 trillion. Out of $13 trillion you see floating around this country, as an instance. Then I got 2 white men. I got Larry Ellison and Bill Gates. Those 2 individuals alone got more money than all 36 million black folk in America put together. As a matter of fact, if I were to go to Wall Street and see what Larry Ellison and what Bill Gates got invested in Wall Street here in New York, they got 6 times more wealth than all the blacks got invested in the United States. If I were to take the average white person in America and lay them outside a black person on the table and say, what's the comparative difference? The white person has 3,500 times more wealth than the black person. How are you going to talk about equal opportunity? You cannot be done. Let me tell you, for those who missed it over here, I'm going to go over here. They're talking now about women, for instance. I always hear women running around talking about, well, I'm different. The issues of gender is nothing to do with race. That's BS. If I were to take a black woman and put her beside a white woman, a female-headed household, I'll find out that for every dollar that the white woman has, the black woman has 3 cents. How in the hell are you going to compete and make yourself equal to a white woman who has $1, you got 3 cents? You understand my point? Mr. Nigga, over here then. Yes, over here. Over here. If I were to take it like Hispanics, I got all these blacks that want to always have a rainbow coalition to work with everybody their own people. If I were to let me tell you about that. If I take Hispanics come to this country, keep in mind now that of all the Hispanics and Asians in America, and all the Arabs, that 90% have been in the United States less than 20 years. 90% have been in the United States less than 20 years. And yet they all got more wealth and power and resources than blacks in 20 years. Now, if I were to go take Hispanics and compare Hispanics who just ran across the border last night, can't even speak English, and I could take him and put him beside a black person. A Hispanic making $3,000 a year in the United States now can live where a black person making $40,000 to $50,000 a year can live. If I were to take a white person and take that $40,000 a year bracket, I'll take a $40,000, which is called middle income in the United States, a $40,000 to $50,000 income, look at whites and blacks in there. I find out that if I put those 2 together, that the white person has 5 times in the middle income bracket, has 5 times the wealth that the black person has. Which means, again, if I go to a black person who calls himself middle class and ask him for $5, he's got to figure out what bills I'm going to pay next week. Wow. So you got a major wealth inequity in the country. Now those inequities are now linked to what we call monopolies. If I go across the spectrum, I'll see it across everything. If I were to go look at media, I go take a look at media. I look at newspapers. I'll tell you right now, there are 1,500 daily newspapers in the United States. And out of that is 100% owned by whites. And those are the people that control what you see, read, and learn and feel in the society, is the white media. All 100% of all 1,500 daily newspapers belong to whites. If I were to go look at the cable system, 1,500 cable systems, and cable system in the United States, all basically owned by whites. I go look at the radio stations, 12,000 radio stations, all but something like about 80 belong to whites. I go look at the television stations, 11,800 television stations in the United States, all belong to whites. You don't own anything. You got a monopoly against you that's locking stock and putting you out of business. You're going down the toilet. If I were to look at elected officials in the United States, you still got the same monopoly. Black folk, after 100 years, so-called 140 years of being able to vote, white folks now still got you locked. Less than 1/2 of all elected officials in the United States are black. Less than 1/2 of 1% of black, of all elected officials, you're still locked into the box. And worse than that is that even though you've increased your amount of elected representation in the last 40 years by over 9,000%. I looked at what black folk had in terms of elected officials in 1960. You had 103 elected black officials in 1960. I looked at the conditions of black folk at that time. About the conditions of black folk in terms of housing, food stamp, welfare, imprisonment, schools, everything else. When he had 103 black elected officials. I waited 30 years, looked at it again, and now we went from 103 black elected officials to over 9,000 black elected officials. And guess what happened to the quality of life of black folk? It went back. It even improved, went down.
Right.
Because you see that you can't find black folk in America that would do what this woman would do. They don't want to set up to be black. And there's no direct correlation between the black person in office and black folk getting the damn benefits because they want to represent everybody. Nobody on earth is that silly stupid. Black I'm watching a black man running for the governor down in Louisiana, talking about he wants to be the governor, but he wants to be the governor of all the people. A black man. And I hear him go talk to Colin Powell and ask him, would you be interested in running as either president or vice president of the United States? He said, give me 3 days to talk, think about it. Came back 3 days later and said, I'll tell you what I'll do. If I do decide to go, I want the country to know I'm not there to be a poster boy for black folks. Nobody's that stupid. I've never in my life, I've been in national and international politics for 35 years. I've never ever heard a white person that's running for office, and I will not represent my people should I get elected. Only black folks. So you got all these inequalities, inequities that nobody wants to confront and deal with. Now, how did they come about? Let me give you a run through quick history with you and show you how they came about. Now, these inequities are killing us, and the inappropriate behavior patterns of our people are killing us. Those are only two things you got: inappropriate behavior patterns of black folks, and also the wealth, structural, economic inequity. Let me show you how they came about very quickly. Now, they didn't come about by accident. See, let's go back to the whole concept of what happened to black folk in Africa. When you go back to the 14th century, you find that's when it basically started, picked up. In 1488, when you had Claude Anderson that said, don't start enslaving black folk. Man, don't start enslaving Indians, or if you're going to enslave anybody, use niggers. That's right. Now, this is a Catholic Pope in 1488. At that point in time, by 1500, they started to have a massive exploitation of black folk. Why? Because Europe was being devastated with poverty, crime, and diseases.
Like now.
So Europe didn't have anything. At that time, Africa was a mighty strong nation. They had a wealthy nation. Europe had nothing. So blacks were up here in terms of a nation, whites were in the ditch. Blacks on the mountain, remember this, blacks on the mountain in terms of a nation and wealth, power, and a communal lifestyle that was a cohesive style of living. Whites were in the ditch. Now, at that point on, by 1500s, within 13 years, they began the slave trade and picked it up. So between 1500 and 1650, that's 150 years, the first they did, the years that they picked up almost 5 million blacks and shipped them directly into Central America, which y'all call Mexico now. They shipped 5 million blacks there. Who shipped them? This time it was Spain. Spain picked it first. Spain shipped 5 million blacks there. And in that 150 years, those black folk were forced using sticks and stones in their bare hands to dig for gold and silver throughout Central America. And black folks then dug something like about 22 tons of silver, 16 tons of gold out with their bare hands that enriched Spain. And so Spain now picked up enough money to do what they call, to get involved what we call a race. That race now was against Portugal, was another slave trading country, against the Arabs, who were slave traders, against the Dutch, who were slave traders, and then the English became slave traders. Now you got a race going on. That was a contest. Race is a contest. Race is a contest. Race is a contest. That's where it started. That's where racism came from. And I want you all to start dealing with reparations. The first thing you better understand, or stay away from me, you better understand what racism is. Don't keep sitting there thinking it's an attitude about getting along with people. Racism is a contest between groups of people and organizations for wealth, power, and resources. That's all it is. It is a competitive relationship to acquire groups and wealth, power. And so when race started, the contest started then to develop the Western world. And it was between all those nations. So then every nation picked up what Pope Anderson has said, and every religion jumped into it. Every ethnic group jumped into the race. And the race was to use black folks to exploit them, to exploit their country, to enrich themselves and make their group powerful and rich and wealthy. And then the contest was the race was to develop the Western civilization. And now, as they did that, starting in the 1600s, I just left off, in 1609, then King James of England, who jumped into the race and said, if we're going to do this thing, since the Pope has now, in 1488, says let's use niggers to do it, let's rewrite the Bible. So we can justify doing it. So then he made major inclusions into the King James Version of the Bible. That's why the King James Version of the Bible. I got black one on every Sunday, read the King James Version. So you know how the hell the King James Version of the Bible. Run around. Here's how they break the King James Version of the Bible. Now you should be saying, how in the world did King James get into the Hebrew Scriptures? You got to understand that. When every Bible, every preacher, well, we got to look at the King James Version of the Bible. He doesn't even know what the hell he's doing. Now he rewrote the Bible to justify just the race that was going on between all these different countries and where to rid themselves off of black folk. And then all the scriptures were changed about teaching the black slave, you know, that he's to obey his master, and that he's a servant, and all these kind of things were stuck in there, and the teaching that he should be humble and obedient.
See, they put all that stuff in there. So then between the 1600s all the way up to about 1800, they then used the Bible to be able to justify and enslave the black folk. So in 1672, now I'm running a little too fast. Let me go back.
Take your time. All right.
Okay. I didn't want to talk this long to you all, but that's
No. Lay it out.
So they go back to 16 on. So by 1619, you get the first load of black folks started coming into America. They were brought in off a Dutch vessel, and they were traded down in Jamestown for water and supplies. And they dropped 20 blacks there. Now, even though in reality, I need to tell you all before I go any further, is that blacks had been in this country long before that. Okay, I'm not talking about the ones down in TV, South Carolina, that Leon Bennett's talking about. I'm talking about what you all never known and never talked about, is that you already had blacks in this country called the Folsom people. The Folsom people have been in this country almost 16,000 years. The Folsom people were the people that lived around Arizona, New Mexico, and places like that. That's why you got a Folsom, Arizona. That's why you got a Folsom prison. That's why you got Folsom, California. You go look at your archaeological facts, you find a group called the Folsom people. Those were African-based people that had come to this country. That's why all those pyramids. And when the Asians came across the Bering Straits that came down, they interbred with the Folsom people. That's why the Indians were not yellow with slant eyes. They inbred with the black folk and became Indians. And so I want you to know that. But that's sort of Folsom people, the oldest people in this country. So when you hear all these Indians running around hollering Native Americans, you tell them that's bull. You know, you're not native here. You walk across the Bering Straits, you're an immigrant, just like the rest of the groups that walk in here. As black folk are the only people that are immigrants, that's basic people in this country. Let me go back to my point then about 1619. You brought in those 20 people. They dumped those 20 people in this country. At that time, they traded them for supplies and water, and they indentured them. They became indentured service for about 5 or 6 years. So by 1626, 1627, they were released. They were free. They were set free, and they intermingled everybody up to about 1638. Now, here's what all the structural inequities began to build up that I was to tell you all about. So starting in 1638, all of a sudden, whites got upset because black folk coming around now free and interbreeding and married or anything else, going to bed with white folk. So this Maryland colony, the state of Maryland, right down the road south of here, the Maryland colony put out a public edict called the Doctrine of Exclusion. The Doctrine of Exclusion was the first brick that this country laid to be able to do in black folk. That Doctrine of Exclusion said in public policy says this, that black people shall never be permitted to enjoy the fruits of white society. That was called an exclusion policy, to exclude blacks from any everything that's a benefit. Now remember these points now when we start talking about reparations. It's called an exclusion policy. That was the first public policy to always exclude black folk. That was put in effect in 1638. Now, between 1638 and about 1660, the European colonies were raising holy hell with the whites over here, and probably the number of whites at that time wouldn't work more than what's sitting in this room right now. You only had less than 200 or 300 whites in the country at that time. Now they were getting on them about why don't they do what they were sent here for? They did not come here for religious freedom. Forget that bull. They came here looking for gold and wealth and resources. Leonard was telling you about. They came here to get wealth and resources sent back to their mother country. Now, but they couldn't do anything, so they started sending letters back saying, we can't do anything in this nation because it'll take us 100 years to clear the land of the trees, the bugs, the roaches, the rats, the cows, or anything that's out there. We can't even move the damn rocks and the snakes. They said, why not? We don't have a labor class. Then somebody got the smart idea by the early 1660s, said, yes, we do have a labor class. Remember those people we excluded under the Doctrine of Exclusion? Let's use them. And at that time, now we get to build another wall, build that wall a little higher on between whites and blacks in structural economic nexus. So by 1665, let me go back one more point. In 1662, they passed the Navigation Act. The Navigation Act had already told the colonies that anything they produced in terms of resources they were sitting here for had to be sent back on British ships. Now, so by 1665, they now passed something called the enslavement laws. The enslavement laws said now we got a population can do the work. Since whites won't do it, so they don't want to work for anybody white, and Indians refuse to do it, let's use black folk. So they took the enslavement laws, they took that doctrine of exclusion, which is called, and said this, that not only shall black folk be an excluded group, but you should also be in a subordinated group, non-compensated group, non-competitive group for the personal wealth building and comfort of white society. That was called enslavement code. Let me get that to you again, because do not mess around with reparations if you don't understand that. That again, the doctrine of exclusion was expanded. and into the enslavement code, which says that black folks are now being excluded, subordinated, non-compensated, non-competitive workforce for the personal comfort and well-being of white society. That was the enslavement code. Now, when that went into effect, everybody then pounced on it. Now, let me go back to you how racism came out of that. I told you that you're in a race. You're still in the race. You're in a race of contest to get wealth and power. So everybody was competing. They're going to use black folks to get the wealth and power, to build their own power system. Now, as they begin to use black folks, the wealth begins to accumulate. And now whites who have been in the ditch earlier over here, as blacks go up, the whites begin to move up incrementally. They then, in the next 300 years, the 1600s, they then, from the 1500s, they shift in. They shift every somewhere, let's say about 26, they vary, 20 million to 26 million black folks. Now, out of every one they shipped in, everybody coming across the Atlantic, 6 out of 7 were black. 6 out of 7 people coming across the Atlantic were black folks. Those are the people that were shipped into this country. They were black folk. They were not white, they were not Hispanic, they were black people coming across the Atlantic. Now, at that point in time, black folk began to start producing to fill out this race. And black folk then became the engines that were driving civilization, not only in America, but in all these other countries. They were importing blacks also to Europe, into the Middle East. They also importing black folk into Latin America, Central America, North America. They were using blacks to generate wealth. Blacks then began to produce about 98% of all the world now. I'm not talking about tobacco, indigo, rice. They also timber, kerosene, gasoline, tobacco, and everything else. Sugar cane. Black folk became the economic engines of the world. Everybody was using black labor to enrich themselves. Now, I want to get this point out of the way so I can go on. Now, when the race gets going, as white folks begin to build up in wealth and power, that's what race means. Now, when whites got all the wealth and power they got, if you look in the dictionary and see the word ISM. Now, that's a suffix, which means that once you stick that onto a word, that means to maintain the prevailing conditions of anything. ISM added to any word means to maintain the conditions. So as white folks then got begin to push black folk into the ditch, they put themselves on the mountain. Once they got that established, then that became racism. They said, now make sure that black folk lost the race, we got the wealth and power, put ism on it. Ism means that do not approve of anything, support anything that would change the ratio between blacks and whites. That's racism. It has nothing in the world to do with these other things we've been talking about. Now, I told you a few minutes ago that whites tried to justify it by moving to religion to justify what they were doing to black folk. Religion was used from the 1600s up until the 1800s. Now, during that course of time, we had a lot of little pseudo-white scientists that kept playing around with a thing called genus and species, linking them, going from the superior to the inferior. They were trying to find out, is a tree higher in the ranking order than moss or microbes? Is a cow higher in order than a mouse? They started playing these kind of games and linking things from the top to the bottom in a vertical order. And they did that, one guy picked it up. Name was Charles Darwin. And so by 1859, on the eve of the Civil War, he came out with a whole concept called the origin of the species, or the survival of the fittest, the survival of the strongest. And what he did, he looked in and saw that because of this race that we were in to develop wealth and power, that black folk had been put into a ditch and white folk on the top of the mountain. He said, aha! Since black folk on the bottom and white folk on the top, so therefore black folk must be inferior and white folk must be superior. And then he came up with a whole concept and switched the whole thing over from religion now that King James has set up. It now switched to biology and said now there must be a biological race. And I still see a lot of our foolish black professors all around America keep talking about debating whether or not there's a damn black race or white. Who cares? That ain't the issue. It has nothing to do with whether or not there's a black race or a white race. It has to do with economic inequalities that have been structurally built. And now when we took off from Charles Darwin, then from 1859 until 1960, everybody kept talking about it in terms of a biological race. Blacks are a biological race, biological race. And then during the civil rights movement, it switched from a biological race, it switched to an attitude. To where now racism is an attitude, whether or not you like people, whether or not you hate people, what is hatred, what is bigotry, what is discrimination, what is bias, what is prejudice, all that stuff is totally immaterial again. It has nothing to do with getting black folk out of a hole. Everybody is prejudiced. You got a right to be prejudiced. All prejudice means you got a preconceived values that you place on something. You have to be prejudiced to be able to live in a society. Discrimination means you got now based on that prejudice, you're gonna make a choice. Do you want chocolate ice cream or do you want vanilla? Do you want to turn right, do you want to turn left? That's discrimination. You make a choice. That has nothing to do with racism. Racism is a structural economic inequity between groups of people for power and wealth. And now what has happened now is that's why we can't correct it. And that's why you never ever see a white racist as long as you live. Because now it's an attitude. As long as they convince black folks to get along, they don't hate black folks, and they don't have anything against black folks, but there's no more racism. That's not the issue. You got to go back to the original concept of racism, which was to build a structural economic inequity between whites and blacks. And that's what happened. So they built this structural economic thing between blacks and whites, and here's how they did it. I go back now and pick up in 1672. In 1672, after they passed the thing about religion, then they said that no black person could be baptized to make sure that there's no way he could even hook up with any religion. So religions then make sure black folks couldn't get out of the box. So they passed a law saying a slave could not be baptized. Then I go up to about 1705. 1705, then they said, well, look, we got all this, this is a good thing we got going. We got all these Negroes we bring into the country. So they started putting out advertisements all over Europe saying, don't worry about the labor anymore, we got all the free labor you need. And that's what Jeffrey is talking about, labor. We got all the free labor, we got all the free land. And so starting about 1704, 1705, they had literature going all over Europe saying anybody who wants to get rich, go to America. We guarantee you, we'll give you free land and free labor. You got to be an idiot not to come here and not get rich. And so everything that was white began to pour into America. They weren't coming looking for no damn religious freedom. They were coming looking for free land and free labor. And so what they did at that point, they created in 1705 what's called the slave code. The slave code then said, look, this is a good thing. But now we got to learn how to control it. We got to build in some external controls so we can maintain these relationships. If we're going to put blacks in the ditch and whites now for the first time in about 500-600 years going to be on the mountain, we must structure some kind of a concept that will keep whites on the mountain, blacks in the ditch. They enacted what's called a slave code in 1705. The slave code defined in very specific terms how black folk were to act. How black folk could not, and under no circumstances, compete with or challenge whites for power and wealth. Y'all understand what I'm saying? Yeah. That you must stay subordinate, that you must stay according to the slavery law, you must stay subordinate, you must stay non-competitive, you must stay excluded, you must be don't look for compensation, don't look for any money, anything else. And you cannot raise your hand. If you're getting whipped, you cannot strike a white person, you can't carry a weapon, you can't carry a tool, you cannot try to escape. All this stuff is put into the slave code, defining that black folk will stay on the bottom. Now, at the same time, that slave code also wrote create that inequality Bob wants me to tell you about. It was told how white folks were to act, that they were always to act superior, that no white person was authorized to ever lift a black man up to make him equal to a white person, so he'd be violating those laws of making black folk equal. That the white person was not to let a black folk speak to him without being spoken to. He must get off the sidewalk. He must not speak to a white person with his hat on. He must always look down when a white person speaks to him. He cannot address a white woman. Cannot be in their proximity without a white man being, and all these kind of things. That was called a slave code. In addition, and that began to lock in those structures between black people being in the ditch and whites on the mountain. So they said, what else can we do to make sure blacks, that structural economic inequity stays between whites and blacks? Then right along with the slave codes in 1705, they passed what's called a Diversity Act of 1705. Now, the Diversity Act of 1705 was a safeguard as an external means of control to regulate to make sure blacks stayed in the ditch and whites stayed in the top of the mountain. And the Diversity Act says this: for every 5 black slaves that you have in this country, you must have at least 1 white person to supervise and come in between and watch and monitor what they're up to. And so at that point in time, they'd gotten most of the whites out of Europe. They didn't have any more, so they started cleaning out the prisons and insane asylums in Europe and sending them to the United States. And they set up Georgia. Georgia became a filter there. Georgia became a filter where they started shipping them all into Georgia. All this insane, crazy-ass white folks were brought out of Georgia. And they were put there specifically because South Carolina was before they went south, and to protect them because Florida was a Spanish territory, and you had all those runaway slaves down in there. And those blacks were raising holy hell fighting, trying to go back and bring their own people to Florida. And that's what created those later on in the 18th century, created all those 3 Seminole wars. It was not Indians, it was black folk. So that's the word Seminole means runaway slaves. But that's what created those Seminole wars. And so they put all these slaves there as white folks right in Georgia to be a buffer to protect the southern the rest of those colonies. And they said that for every 5 black slaves will have 1 white person. Now that was called the Diversity Act of 1705. Today you all call it multicultural and cultural diversity. You haven't learned a darn thing in 300 years. You're still playing the same game. Run around trying to watch, let people monitor, watch you, bring them in. We need to get together. That's the same thing that whites came up with in 1705. Now we go a little past in 1710, they said, now we got them externally controlled, as we acquire the wealth and power, we got an external control to make sure black folks stay in the ditch. And they said, now what we'll do now is that we were trying to put as physical control. We want to physically control black folks, as physical control on blacks. By 1710, the thing got to be so good, they said, now we need, wouldn't it be nice if we had some external control, so as we build this wealth and power, the niggas will stay in the ditch, the whites stay on the mountain? And somebody said, yeah. They said, what's this? And they come over to Virginia. So Virginia then got together a legislature, came up with a thing called Meritorious manumission. Meritorious manumission says if we set up a system where we'll train blacks to be able to see everything through the eyes of the dominant white society, so that they would think through whiteness, see whiteness, and act as if they were a white person. And they said if we does that, what we'll do four things. If he then can see things through the eyes of whites, and then he can learn how to protect the white person's property, protect the save a white person's life, protect the white person's life, invent something a white person can make money off of, or would squeal on and inform on his own people anytime he tried to plan a slave revolt, we would give him meritorious manumission, which means he earned his freedom. And that way we'll set him free and give him a few dollars. And so the first one to do that was called, in Virginia, was called the name of Nigger Willis. They set him free then and set him up as a model, and set him free and gave him a little land, a little bit of money. And see, nowadays, they're still doing the same thing. You got all these Sanborn blacks, all conservatives, and everything else. What you want to do with black folks, you always got 3 or 4 they're going to bring out of the bushes. They got a list, all of America. I don't care what black folks want to do. They got all these meritorious manumission blacks. There's the Sanborns who sitting there waiting to be rewarded and recognized and compensated for going out and blocking anything the blacks want to do. If you all right now start talking about reparations, they look down the list and pull 20 of them out just like that. Yeah. And they do that because we don't have an accountability system, but we're going to stop that shortly. Because we're going to start nailing them. Okay? But the point is that was meritorious manumission. By 1712, here comes the guy that you all call Willie Lynch. Now, I know you all love to talk about Willie Lynch. Now, we have not been able to factuate and document whether or not Willie Lynch actually exists, but I did find a little bit of reference here and there. And what Willie Lynch was then was a white man who had a big plantation in Jamaica. He had a seasoning place, breaking blacks in. And he then heard about meritorious manumission in Virginia, in Jamestown. He then called a boat, and 2 years later he arrived up here in Virginia and met with the colonists and said, let me be a consultant, let me go around the country and show y'all how to treat these niggas and break them in and seize them. And I guarantee you I can separate them so they never come together again. But what he's saying I'm going to do, he said, not only since you already have conditioned them to see everything through the eyes of white society, I'm now going to teach you how to divide them up so they never come together. By teaching them to go against each other. Whenever an issue breaks, have the black women talk about gender issues rather than staying on the black issues. You know, to have black gays talk about gay issues rather than staying on the black issues. They have others talking about, it was a class issue and who run over mixing with other groups. That's what divides you up. And or place religion before your skin color. So that's the whole point of Willie Lynchism. That held effect, and that then was the cement. That's building internal control, again, to keep the distance. Whites on the mountain, blacks in the ditch. So wealth began to accumulate based on that basis. More and more wealth began to pour in. By 1847, we had one white man named J.P. Morgan. In 1847, J.P. Morgan had almost 20% of the total wealth of this nation. The first J.P. Morgan in 1847 had almost 20% of the total wealth of this nation had accumulated. Now, he had all kinds of involvement in slavery all around. We had shoe industry, cotton industry, textile industry. He was making all kinds of money. At that point in time, in this nation, the whites had invested over $8 billion just in black slavery. That was the biggest budget in the entire United States. Whites had invested more money in black slaves by 1840 than they had the total amount of money in all levels of government and all the businesses in the entire United States. That's where your wealth was accumulating. The wealth was accumulating so fast that a white person in the United States who had had 2 slaves in the South had the total equivalent wealth of an average white person north by his house, his animals, his tools, and his money. As a matter of fact, a white man with 2 slaves had a walking express card. He didn't have to work. All he did was get up in the morning and send them out and lease slaves. As a matter of fact, if you ever call a gang system where you had 100 slaves in the South, that 100 slaves then, a gang system, that made that wealth, that white person so wealthy, he had over 400 times the wealth of any white person living in the North. So all your wealth was locked into the South. And that's why that's really the basis of the Civil War. The whites were fighting to redistribute the wealth. They wanted the wealth redistributed. The war was not fought over black folk. Nobody gave a damn about black folk. As a matter of fact, one survey was conducted in 1860 on what people felt about slavery, because the slavery issue was pretty hot. They found that less than 1/2 or 1% of any white person in the United States wanted slaves free. So when you start talking about reparations, you're going to hear white folks run this game on you about, we went out and fought to get the free blacks in the Civil War. The survey shows that less than 1/2 of all the white people in the United States were for freeing black folk. Remember that. They were not interested in freeing black folk. The issue was over the wealth and power. What had happened is that the whites in the South had all the wealth, had the wealth power, they had the political power. Because they came up with that thing about three-fifths of a human being were black slaves. That 3/5 of a human being was not necessarily to evaluate black folk. It was to give white folks in the South an advantage in politics. They were counting those blacks in the voting system and saying, I'm representing those blacks, and the North would not give them full credit. The North said, well, we're going to give you full credit for representing those slaves, we'll give you 3/5 credit for those blacks. And so the South then allowed whites to build a structural, political, economic inequity by counting blacks as 3/5 of a human being for political reasons, so they can take over and control Congress. And what the whites in the North want to do was to break that. They want to break the political structure that whites had over politics. They want to break the wealth that whites had coming out of black labor. Those whites were enjoying all the money coming out of the South was in the South. And so the Civil War was over breaking the economic and political hold that whites had over on the South and over the structure of this country. Now that held true up to the writing of the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. When the 14th Amendment came on about, understand this, the 14th Amendment, that it was not necessarily about freeing blacks. It was what it was about, giving them civil rights. It was not about giving them civil rights. It's not about giving them political opportunity. It wasn't about giving them an education. The first Civil Rights Act came out in 1865. It was about giving black folk economic rights. But when you had Congressman Charles Sutton, Thaddeus Stevens, and Bingham, what they were saying is that black folk in America are going to be one of two things. Either you're going to be slaves, you're going to be free. Until you give black folk and redistribute some wealth to black folk, they will always be slaves. Right. And what they recommended in 1865 law was that black folks should minimally have 40 acres, a mule, and $100. And they said if you don't give them that, they'll always be slaves. And Andrew Johnson vetoed that bill. And it came back again in 1866 law, which is still on the book. I haven't seen one black use it yet. That's what that law was about. It was about giving black folk economic reparations. And nobody wanted to give it to them, but those liberal congressmen was trying to do it. And they were doing it primarily because they had whites, they had black mistresses. But anyhow, they passed that law to give black folk wealth and power. And they were saying that if you don't give redistribution of wealth and power, black folks will always be slaves. Now, since you never got into reparations, how in the world can you say that you're no longer slaves? Now, I know you all like to use the word post-slavery. You're not into the post-slavery. You never got out of slavery. You didn't get
right. That's right. Right. Yes. True.
Now, at that one time, the reparations issue jumped up. The first person to bring it up was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was the first person to bring up reparations. But he wasn't bringing it up for black folk. He brought it up for white folk. What he said is that I'll be willing to give reparations to all white plantation owners, all white slaveholders, if they turn their black slaves loose so that the country would not be split. He didn't care about black folk. He was trying to save the Union. He says, if you're willing to turn those slaves loose, we'll give you reparations. He sent a bill over to the Congress, to the legislature, and the congressmen vetoed it. I mean, when they approved it, they said basically that we don't have enough money. We don't have $8 billion to pay off all the slaves in the country. But some whites did get reparations. The whites got reparations in Washington, D.C. They paid them $375 for every slave they turned loose in Washington, D.C. So whites got reparations. Also, between 1865 and 1900, we had something like about 26 million European whites that came in this country. They got reparations. What did they get? They got almost 1 billion acres of land in the Homesteading Act of 1862 and the Land Right Act. They got almost 1 billion acres of land. But at the same time, they turned loose those black slaves. They would not let them get in the land. Why? Because, again, they were trying to create that structural economic inequity. So black folk were denied the right to get land by the last Homesteading Act of 1862, which did not expire until 1900. Black slaves coming out of slavery should have gotten that. Blacks should be raised in holy hell by that law when the Attorney General of the United States says niggas are entitled to get that land, even though the law was on the books and anybody could get it. Even when black folk were free, any citizens could have gotten that land between 1852 and 1900, and black folks didn't get an acre. But 26 million white Europeans came in and got it to build a wall between blacks and whites higher in terms of wealth and equity. And so they got the wealth and power, got it. At the same time also, as this wealth was beginning to build, we had black folk at that time who didn't understand this and don't understand today, that the 14th Amendment, you're going to go for reparations, go back to that 14th Amendment. And I don't care what any white person tells you in the United States, you can now sue for reparations using the 14th Amendment. Listen to me. You can sue using the 14th Amendment. I have not heard one black scholar. I have heard one black scholar make that nation. Go back to the 14th Amendment. You cannot sit there and give all those white Europeans coming in 26 million, give them reparations. You gave all those whites reparations. You've been giving Indians reparations now for over 300 years. You gave the Japanese reparations. You gave Japanese reparations 3 times. You gave the Germans reparations on the Marshall Plan. You gave Japan reparations 13 billion under the Point 4 Plan. You cannot keep giving everybody reparations and not give it to black folks. That is a violation of the 14th Amendment. Now what does the 14th Amendment say? The 14th Amendment says this, that black folk ought to be treated similar to white folks under similar circumstances. That's called due process and equal protection. So all you got to do now is you don't have to spend all your time trying to get laws passed on the book. All you got to do is go back to the 14th Amendment. It says that since you've given reparations to every other ass coming to the country, you need to give it to black folks. And don't waste your time trying to pass all those bills and go back and say that start jamming the courts with 14th Amendment suits. Y'all understand what I'm saying? You start jamming suits. Now, another thing they try to trick you on is that in 1860, because in 1857, we had the Dred Scott decision. At that time, there was no 14th Amendment. And white folk got all their rights out of what we call the 5th Amendment. The 5th Amendment gave white folks their rights. That's how they shut Dred Scott down. See, Dred Scott was fighting for his independence and his right to be free. But white folks then used the 5th Amendment and said that you don't have the right to support our rights. Whites had the 5th Amendment as their right. And that's how they shut him down in 1857. Now, after the 14th Amendment came in 1867, now what white folks are doing is going back and laying claim, trying to take the 14th Amendment from you all. They take the 14th Amendment claim, it is for everybody. The 14th Amendment was not written for everybody. It was written strictly and solely for black folk. You must go back and take all that enabling legislation and all those issues and say it was written strictly for black folk. It was not written for Mexicans, Hispanics, Arabs, midgets, humpbacks, lesbians, nobody but black folk. You go back and take it and use it for yourself. If you let them keep the 14th Amendment, you'll never get out of the hole. Because everything you do, they're going to claim there's reverse discrimination by using your weapon against you. And you must go back now and start making legal cases in this country that the 14th Amendment was written for black folk and black folk only. And don't let all these other groups use it. That's how they got you trapped. What they did, they pulled the car into the garage too far, and like in forward discrimination, and now the minute you want to pull it out, pull it back, they say, no, you got to put it in neutral. That's reverse discrimination. There is no such thing as a reverse discrimination. And the mere fact that whites don't mention the word reverse discrimination automatically implies that there must have been some forward discrimination. And what you must say is that we don't want to hear that stuff. But I'm going to sit down because I'm hot now, you're hot now, I can talk a long time. But let me give it 2, 3 points and then I'm going to conclude. One, be wary of all these objections they're going to bring to reparations. One, they're going to tell you that white folks have no obligation to you. You go back and use all the data that's in black labor white wealth, and you'll be able to show in all terms how whites got their wealth. Okay? And I'm not going to molest you and tell us to give you a lot of redundant information, but I'll let you that book to show you everything, how Wall Street was regulated off of black slaves in this country. You go find all that data. They're going to tell you that you can prove, and beyond any doubt, that whites built the entire world, we built the entire world economic structure off of black labor. That's in there. It's documented for you. Now, the second thing they're going to tell you is that, well, they can say, well, my daddy, my people never owned any slaves, and my people weren't even in the country. And that's fine. When they tell you that, you say, that's good, that you weren't in the country. Now you owe double benefits. Double obligation. Anybody who's not in this country, that's come to the country since slavery, have an even greater obligation than the ones that were here. Because they came in and got a free ride off the black folks. And see, if black folk had not built this country to where it was an acceptable, attractive place for them to come to, they wouldn't have been able to come here in the first place. That's right. So they owe you for making the country so nice and so attractive they came here in the first place. So they owe you twice. So you jump on them and say, no. So they jump up and open their mouths, nail them, use that against them. They say, well, my parents weren't here and I came here, I'm a recent immigrant. You said, then you're going to pay double taxes. You tax them twice, and that way they quit saying that. Thirdly, they tell you stuff about, well, white man, we fought the Civil War. to free black folk. Remember that. Because you didn't fight the war to free black folk. You fought to try to redistribute the wealth and resources out of the South to the North so you can take over the government and control it. So you can use that money well and then go develop the West. Okay? So don't listen to that lie. And last thing, I'll tell you something about, black folk. It won't help black folk give them the money. No, it won't. But here's what you need to do. Tell them we don't want necessarily direct money to give an individual. We must be very creative. You must get your money in reparations in a lot of forms. One, there can be some direct compensation to those people to show a direct relationship. We'll take that money. Two, we want a lot of money put into economic development banks around this country where we can go borrow it to build businesses. Three, I want black folks to also be able to get everything the Indians got. I want to start tracking the Indians in the United States. Tracking Indians. Now, Indians, don't worry about the Japanese, don't worry about the Jews in terms of reparations. Follow the Indians. Only Indians and blacks were spelled out in the Constitution. And Indians got benefits that we didn't get. Indians are now in a protected class. Indians in a protected class. And what means that they're getting privileges and benefits that black folks should have gotten. Now, nobody's ever done anything to Indians, and yet you hear white folks say, well, slavery ended 140 years ago, we don't own black folk anything. If slavery ended 140 years ago, and you don't own blacks anything, why in the world are you still taking care of Indians? You know, and you never, the Indians have never done anything of significance. You didn't, they didn't own the land in the first place. The land was out there available free. Now, why are you still compensating Indians? Every state has an Indian commission. We have a federal Indian bureau that puts in money every year, $27,000 for every American Indian. We got the Indian Bureau giving $170 million every year to the Cherokee and only $155,000 of them. Now they get money. They got 237 reservations and 257 gambling casinos. And then those gambling casinos make more money than all the black businesses in the United States put together. Indians are in a protected class. Now how they get in that protected class? I want my people in the same protected class. I was in that one. And I don't care if any of you don't want to be in the protected class, you go about your business. I want to be in the protected class, okay? Now here's how they got into a protected class. Indians said, look, they said, we are defenseless, powerless people because you beat the hell out of us. And they said, yes, we did. Listen, then we got an obligation to protect you. And so they put the Indians in that category. Exactly, Indians say, now you took our land, so we now got to lay what we call natural right claims against the land, so that way you owe an indebtedness to us. Black folks should do the same thing. Instead of natural rights against the land, you should be laying a claim against natural, what we call natural law. Natural law means that any place on earth, all laws are based on the fact you cannot dutifully deprive a group of people of the fruits of their labor. You cannot. That's the whole basis of all law, is that you cannot take away the fruits of a person's labor. Blacks will lay a claim based on natural law, and then go out and say, we want to be in that same position. Next thing the Indians did, Indians turned around then and said, what we're going to do then, we're going to set up a council for ourselves, or call ourselves a civilized tribe. Blacks say the same thing, that we are also independent people in this country, that since we are a nation within a nation, right now, almost 97% of all the black people in America still as segregated as they were in 1960. You're still segregated. Declare yourself a nation like the Indians declare themselves to be a nation. Nobody ever declared the Indians being a foreign nation. They started using that word, we are a foreign nation. You all use the term that we are also a foreign nation, just like the Indians. Thirdly, what Indians did, Indians also turned around then and said that unlike anybody else, we don't want to be integrated. We want to have our separate land and be a separate people. Black folks foolishly said, we want to be integrated with everybody and be with them. We want to be with you all. And what that told white folks was this, is that when you didn't get your reparations and you want to be with white folks, what you said to them is that we don't care how poor we are, just as long as we with y'all. And then all them little things, y'all understand? And so that's about as foolish as you can get. Indians said, no, we're going to still by ourselves. So what Indians got then, I want y'all to get, they got tax exempt status. I want y'all to look for tax exempt status. Said, we don't want to pay the damn taxes. Now, and this Civil Rights Act fail to be repassed in the next 2 or 3 years, you all go against it. Say, no, we don't want no more voting rights if you don't want it. Say, you all keep your voting rights. You know why? Because if you don't have the voting rights, guess what? Don't disrespect you, baby. I don't like that. Well, if you don't have voting rights, you don't pay any taxes. I can get more wealth, I can redistribute more wealth for blacks not paying taxes, keeping in our own community than what we're getting from politics. They ain't putting any money into the black community. If you kept your money in your community by saying, go ahead and kill the Voting Rights Act. I wouldn't get the champion the Voting Rights Act. No, go ahead. I'm not paying no more damn taxes. I got 36 million black people. We can keep our money in our own community. Go ahead and kill it. Do not beg white folks to pass the Voting Rights Act again. They're going to come up with consideration next 2 weeks. Let them kill it. Let them kill it. and just wait until fine. In this country, no taxation, no representation, no taxation. We won't pay our taxes, take our money, and rebuild our community. Next thing you do, I want y'all to go after licensures. Every license they got in this country for electric companies, utility companies, radio stations, TV stations, everything that has a license, we want to put that on our reparations, and we want to demand a quota. We want to demand something like 15% of all the licenses of everything in this country. From utilities, electric companies, gas companies, they're across the board. And go after all the cable systems I just mentioned to you. Out of 1,500 cable systems, black folks should have owned 15% of all of them. After licenses, taxes, and statuses, also demand money now for educational benefits. Also, like the Indians do, you want land. They got all this vacant land all over America. And the state owns some, the federal government owns some, and all these inner cities. Go claim that land and make that land tax exempt. And once you make that land tax exempt, build casinos on them just like the Indians got casinos on them. Build casinos. You build gambling casinos. And then let white folks come in every night, throw their money on the table, you keep it in the ghetto. But anyway, you're on a hot time, so I'll quit right there.
I just told Bob I'm coming back another time. I'm gonna ask for some gender time.
All right.
Go ahead, Bob.
It's all right. I don't want you to walk out of breath. We're going to go in the next 10 minutes.
As you all might know right now, in the Powerlessness Enterprise Corporation, we're now listed on Wall Street. What I did, I spent $280,000 and about 14 months to try to put black folk as a race on Wall Street. We're now listed on the PEC Corporation. We're now selling stock on initial public offering. This is the first time in the history of this nation we have a chance to build industries and own industries. We're going to now try to take the seafood industry, which is a $104 billion industry. Black folk can now take the seafood industry. We got one factory up. We're going to build factories across America. We've been selling stock now for about 90 days. We didn't raise enough money. I just got an extension. And most of the poor blacks are buying it in the United States. We haven't got one penny out of New York. If we don't sell this stock and get enough money, in the next 29 days, I got about 4 white companies. One is the International Production Bank of Germany. They're going to take all this stuff away from you. Now, you got a chance to build your own seafood industry. Why am I saying that? Is because any fish you keep catching the sea, now got worms in it, and PCB, lead, and mercury. Seafood is dying out around the world. That's the next big source of food. It's seafood. Now, and 43% of all the seafood around America. We're going to raise our own seafood in the ghettos, in factories, warehouses inside the United States. Most of our buildings will be about 5 or 6 blocks long, just like a General Motors building. I got special technology, special tanks to raise seafood. We're going to be bringing in shellfish from the island. We're going to set up black businesses across America, restaurants, sit-down restaurants, walk-in restaurants, fast food restaurants, fresh markets. We're going to control the seafood industry. Why the industry? Because we got an advantage in there. We control the top. Black folks eat 3 to 4 times more seafood than whites. We spend $9 for every $1 whites spend. If we got the top, all we got to do is go to the bottom and start producing and manufacturing. And we got the technology now. We're selling the stock. And I got to figure out, I need your help to raise enough money. The stock sells for $8 a share. $8 a share. We need to buy this fast. My biggest problem right now in California, blacks are buying like crazy, and also Ohio and Michigan. But the problem is that I can't get to you all in this city. I don't know how to communicate with you. You don't have the radios in the book here. Whites will shut you down. You got to spread the word. You got to buy the stock fast. And if I don't raise enough money in the next 29 days, we got to give up that industry. That's the first time we will ever have a chance to own industry. It'll probably be the last time you ever have. Let me give you a number to call. Write down this number. Tell everybody to call this number. Call Thomas Lomax. Thomas Lomax. Call him at 215-822-1561 for the South. Again, that's Thomas Lomax. That's 215-822-1561. We're going to put blacks in the seafood business like Bob Law is going into. We're going to own the seafood industry from the bottom to the top. That means produce it, manufacture it, wholesale it, warehouse it, distribute it, retail it, and consume it, okay? That's going to be our